Kicking off the list at number 10, Smokey behind. When somebody tells you that you're just blowing smoke, it means that you're lying, okay? You've now been given exaggerated information of sorts. Well, back in the 18th century, they literally had to blow tobacco smoke at your behind. Yeah, weirdest work break ever, I'd say. So why did we perform magician enemas back in the day? What was the deal here? Well, tobacco smoke enemas were used to treat quite a few symptoms, or they thought so, including a common cold. These enemas came in these fancy kits with a fancy rubber tube. It was all fancy because it was an honest medical practice at the time. It was done by legit medical practitioners. This is the funniest part. The idea was that the tobacco smoke could warm up a soon-to-be deceased body. The nicotine would stimulate your adrenal glands, jolting you back into good health. The best health, might we say. And the way they would do it in the mid-1800s was by just blowing smoke and just waiting, seeing what happened. We're figuratively and literally blowing smoke. That's the origin of that saying. Fun fact there. Imagine doing that today. Like, hey, I think I dislocated my shoulder. What do I do? He's like, hey, one sec. Number 9, alarm clocks. While the medical world was one threat in Victorian times, apparently so was the technological side. Who knew? We obviously didn't have reliable alarm clocks back in the 1800s, obviously, but we did have jobs. So in order to get up on time, lamplighters or knockers would come by and tip you off. Yeah, they would just yell in your window and just alarm. That's how you'd wake up. A man would yell into your window and smack you with a stick. Legend has it, a young man named Sam Wardell, he got a little creative with his wake-up calls. He needed more than a lamplighter at 5 a.m., so he would Tony Stark this alarm clock gadget. He would use wires, a bunch of stones, all that unsafe stuff. Then at a certain time, stones would fall to the ground, of course waking him up, and presumably everyone else in the building. That would be alarming. Well, Christmas Eve 1885, tragedy unfolded. A few friends had come over for a holiday visit, so Sam had to move some furniture around, rightfully so, to make room for, windmills and breakdancing, whatever they did in Victorian Christmas times. The next morning, he forgot to put things back in the small apartment, and the obvious happened. The rocks then fell on him while he was asleep. Yeah, that probably doesn't feel too good. I thought iPhone alarms were jarring. I take back everything I've ever said. Number 8, relaxative. Okay, so right off the bat, the Victorian era was a little messy. I'm sure you've gathered this by now here on Bumblebee. But these messy new illnesses were putting lots of pressure on medical practitioners, so they were desperate for these new treatments. We laugh at Victorian medical treatments, but they tried, okay? They at least tried. They also achieved many medical breakthroughs as well. But when it comes to handling chickenpox in the Victorian era, well, that wasn't one of them. That was not our finest hour. Chickenpox in the Victorian era was being treated by using laxatives. Yeah, let that sink in for a moment. I have chickenpox. What should I do? Well, try some laxatives. Yeah, folks would slam some castor oil and then, ready for this? They would get even more sick. Who would have thought? You thought you were uncomfortable before castor oil. Yeah, chug that, and then now you're even weaker. Now you're dead. Number 7, backed up. Let's say it's the Victorian era and let's say you're constipated, right? It happens, Well, bad ideas will most likely follow, if you didn't already guess that. According to Merck's 1899 medical manual, small amounts of strychnine were prescribed to those who were constipated. Yeah, the strychnos nux vomica was thought to better the gastric functions. Even a small amount of this stuff would attack your respiratory system. You'd contract, you convulse, it's horrible. It would be a painful way to go out. It's much, much worse than being constipated. Any day. I would much rather be constipated than any type of strychnine. Are you kidding me? Number 6, leeches. I grew up with hearing problems. I've been around the block with earaches, ear infections. I had ear tubes numerous times, all that jazz. So I feel really bad for the folks in this next one, okay? I hear you. Pun intended. In the Victorian era, medical practitioners would say to use leeches for your ear infections. That's the number one trick they don't want you to know. There it is. Once they're attached to you, the idea was that they can numb pain while at the same time providing proteins and peptides to its host. So on paper, again, the idea made sense. But the science didn't quite follow, did it? It wasn't entirely hopeless though. Recently in 2004, the FDA reintroduced leeches to the medical world, because their bite can break up blood clots and induce blood flow. So it's not entirely hopeless. We talked about leech collectors on this channel before, so of course we have to talk about more of the science that they were hoping to achieve with it, right? Also, I worked at a retirement home when I was 16. I thought that job sucked. Imagine being a leech collector? No way.
Number 5, the potato famine. The potato, so rugged, so versatile. Think of all the ways you can prepare a potato. Boiled, broiled, baked, mashed, pan-fried, deep-fried, french fries, hash browns, latkes, and sometimes you can put them in soup. or stew. Usually pretty cheap and filling, the food of peasants, and I love it. However, during 1845 Ireland, a fungus outbreak was taking hold of potato harvests all over the country, thus creating a large famine that would see over 1 million people perish in a famine. Queen Victoria tried to help but was ineffective, and by help I mean the same effort I put into reaching for the TV remote that's too far away on a lazy Sunday.
Number 4, body snatching. Look, back in the day, making a buck was not so easy. Some people who had absolutely no morals went this route. Basically, you wait around for a recently vacant grave to be not vacant, and before the soil can settle, you remove the inhabitant of said grave and go to your local university and say, "Right, I've got this here fresh non-mangled corpse, give me some money and it's all yours." And Bob's your uncle, you are now the very bottom of the barrel, detritus of human existence. But hey, you made some moolah and can afford to eat your next meal. Honestly, while you may be the worst of the worst people, it's partially the doctors and schools that are to blame for even accepting these fresh, illegally exhumed corpses for study in the first place. It may not sound like a specific event, but some people dressed up for it, so there's that.
Number 3, the Tube in it. The London Underground, baby, the world's first subway, which let me tell you, it's kind of annoying living in Canada when you have two very popular franchises that share two common names for a rapid underground train. Metro and Subway, right? It's so annoying. You Google Metro and Subway and then the grocery store comes.
I never have that.
Okay. Maybe it's a me thing.
Just you.
It's a me thing. Tunnels underneath the city and trains travel through it. It's simple. Well, the first one was opened in 1863, which is an engineering feat to say the least. And it feels like forever ago. I mean, that's older than Canada, for crying out loud. When you think of the Victorian era, you think horses, carriages, top hats, and orphans asking for more gruel. Mind you, the locomotive was different from a modern one, but this is a very modern idea, especially considering that there's no cars yet. Kind of a weird thing.
Number 2, the telephone. On March 7th, 1876, Scotsman Alexander Graham Bell got a patent for his invention of the telephone. 3 days after acquiring the patent, Mr. Bell made his first phone call to his assistant, Thomas A. Watson, saying, "Watson, come here, I want to see ya." And that was that. And we've gone downhill ever since. No, I'm just kidding. The telephone is a huge groundbreaking invention allowing people to communicate across vast distances. But the phone addiction some of us have to deal with now, man, it's rough. Alexander Graham Bell was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, and the whole reason he became interested in the idea of creating the telephone was because of his mother, who was deaf, and his father, Alexander Melville Bell, who was a teacher of elocution, and was famous for the phonetic transcription system he had developed to help the deaf learn to speak, which is really quite sweet, actually.
Number 1, the war to end all wars. Out of all my research about the Victorian era, the start was somewhat muddy. Maybe because historians don't want to take away from North American or Napoleon history. But the end of the Victorian era was more clear. 1914, the war to end all wars. This was the big one, folks. A mixture of militarism, imperialism, alliances, and a power struggle made for a powder keg that ended up exploding in 1914. Unlike a lot of wars, this one actually changed things. Empires fell while others got stronger. Countries on maps were being redrawn. Others stayed the same. The culture? Well, it changed too. What did it? I'm not sure exactly, but what I do know is that when sitting in a wet, freezing, muddy trench for months on end, well, that's horrible, especially when the only thing you have to look at is a red paste that used to be your comrades. It was not a good time. And it made a lot of folks go a little crazy.
Kicking off the list at number 10, accidental science, aka the discovery of penicillin. Sometimes miracles happen when nobody's looking. Alexander Fleming first discovered penicillin back in 1928. At the time, he was actually studying Staphylococcus, which is a bacteria that causes infections and boils, all that nasty stuff. But right before Alexander left for a 2-week vacation, he left a petri dish with some of that Staphylococcus on the lab table rather than storing it away in an incubator. During this well-needed time off, a penicillium mold spore just drifted in there, either through a window or the lab door, some Horton Hears a Who adventure. This tiny speck was well on its way. It was the perfect conditions for a spore flight. The temperature of the room wasn't too breezy, and the lack of one Alexander Fleming allowed time for the mold to fight back and prevent that bacteria from growing any further. He discovered this antibacterial substance was only produced by strains of penicillium. Yeah, the guy accidentally creates penicillin on his time off. What a great time. The 20s were an odd but brilliant time.
Number 9. Prohibition. It's a law that puts fear into wine-drinking moms and beer-drinking dads across the nation. For there was a time when the sale and consumption of alcohol was banned. That means it was a dry country, not one drop to be had. Except for those found in loopholes and all the other crazy loopholes in the system. And by that, I actually mean organized crime filling the shoes of breweries and other openings like literal underground bars called speakeasies to keep the sauce flowing. You know what I mean. Now, to be fair, there was an issue with drinking back in the day, but there's a few issues with banning it as well. The first being that it was in high demand, like stupid high, even before it was banned. So banning it basically gave a green light to bootleggers and criminals to make millions, and they did. And second, it was America's 5th largest industry, putting many out of work and dissolving a very large portion of tax revenue. No surprise it didn't work out.
Number 8, the work week. Okay, seriously, who do we have to talk to? Who do we have to blame for having to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday? Dolly Parton has a groovy tune about it, but when did the 40-hour work week start? Well, 1926 is your answer. The Ford Motor Company, of all companies. Yeah, who do you think? They were the first to have factory workers clock in and out 40 hours a week with a weekend. Nice. Whereas before, you maybe had one day off, maybe, depending on what you were doing. Obviously, more time to rest, eat, and clear your mind, maybe work out. This increased productivity, so it spread like wildfire. Cut to today, we're now advocating for a 4-day work week. We're getting greedy, I know. Shorter hours, same workload. Apparently, this is going well. Productivity is soaring. In Iceland, for example, 2,500 workers tested this 4-day work week. That's literally 1% of Iceland's population, so it worked. Pretty big test run. But now 86% of Iceland's workforce have shorter hours. It's great. Seems like we're well on our way. So sorry, Mr. Ford, we're taking back our Fridays.
Okay, number 7, Valentine's Day. Not the most romantic Valentine's Day ever, but maybe one of the most infamous. Back in 1929, organized crime was no joke. It was everywhere. Thanks to Prohibition and a lot of corruption, it was the age of gangsters. However, one incident in 1929 changed things. On February 14th, 1929, 7 gang members were deleted. This proved to be too much for the public at the time, and the final straw in a large string of violent crimes was up. Until this point, a lot of crooks and gangsters like Al Capone were idolized for their lavish lifestyles and ritzy and swanky nights in the town. This, however, was one step too far and helped to further reform in crime, giving a certain FBI predecessor to rise up and eventually found the FBI. The lesson here? Sure, being a gangster is great. Sign your autographs, live like a fat cat in your penthouse, but there's only so much you can get away with. After it was all said and done, Capone got put away too. And if they can get Capone, they can get you.
Number 6, the birth of brands. When it comes to advertisements, you can't even take the bus down the street without seeing hundreds of ads. I'll catch myself staring at a Sunwing ad for 43 minutes just so I can avoid eye contact with Johnny Jingle Keys in front of me. Even growing up, the amount of pop-ups I had to close really fast, my reflexes are so sharp now, all thanks to those gross pop-ups. And it all started 100 years ago. Huge brands began popping up in the 1920s with these fun slogans, big colorful ads. The 20s witnessed the birth of advertisements from Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Hostess Cakes, Welch's, and of course, one of the most unforgettable, Kool-Aid. Yeah, the Kool-Aid man is 95 years old. Yeah, I bet his knees are starting to feel like glass, that's for sure. Other companies that popped at this time was CVS, the automobile industry obviously, and 2 brothers in California named Walt and Roy Disney. Yeah, they had some startup cartoon studio. Not sure what happened there. Best of luck, guys, keep going. Hopefully they have a GoFundMe maybe.
Number 5, Holder. Okay, picture this. You're walking through a forest in Norse mythology. Nice. Doing as you do. Boy, what a nice forest this is, you say to yourself. I sure am grateful for the Tree of Life and Odin and all that stuff I have because of the such nice things because I pray to them. Don't hurt me. When all of a sudden you spot a lady in the woods and hubba, she's gorgeous. She lures you in. She thinks you're handsome and doesn't care about your receding hairline, beer belly, and the big toenail that you should have got checked by a doctor months ago. I'm calling a lot of people out there. She wants you to marry her. Sounds too good to be true, right? Guys, come on, you know what I'm talking about. But you gotta be careful though, guys. You gotta be careful. Because if you saw her cow's tail before you married her, she keeps it. Or so the story goes. So yeah, they were ladies in the forest with cow tails. You had to marry them, and if you saw their tails before you were married, she'd have it for the rest of life. Makes sense. Sure. Number 4, elves. Elves. Everyone loves elves, especially that movie, Elf. Everyone loves that one. It's like it became an instant Christmas classic. Crazy. The population of elves seems to significantly increase when there's a fan expo in town. Go figure. Elves in Norse mythology represent a small divine figure, similar to the dwarves. They are creators of valuables and smithers, and had their strong place in mythology. And for some reason, when the elves were no longer needed in the land of Vikings and Mead, they went to go work for a fat man in a red coat in the North Pole. And before you even ask, yes, even Father Christmas has his roots in Norse mythology. And yes, before you ask, I know him personally, and I will be telling him who's naughty and nice this year. Christmas might be far away, but I'm watching. Ooh, we're watching. Don't you worry, me and Santa Claus. Ooh. Number 3, Kraken. This one actually surprised me. I didn't know this. I wasn't expecting this to be Norse. But yeah, the Kraken. In a nutshell, the Kraken is a huge octopus or squid-like creature that preys on the poor and doomed sailors who dare cross its path. Now, I'm sure a lot of you fear the deep water because, well, you can't see the bottom of it, and I think that's a rational fear. The reason for that, of course, is because you don't know what's big chillin' at the bottom of that water. The answer? It's the Kraken. That's horrifying. Using its large tentacles, it wraps itself around ships and brings them down to Davy Jones' locker. Or at least that's what happened in Pirates of the Caribbean. That's how I get my knowledge. In some Norse tales, the Kraken is as big as an island. Yeah, if you see an octopus just as big as an island, just turn the boat around at that point. There ain't nothing on the boat that's gonna deal with that business. Just turn it around. Turn the boat around. We're out of here. We're leaving. Just walk it up. Number 2, Dreadr. Okay, let me paint a picture for you. It's a late summer night in 2011. You're a couple inches too deep into your favorite couch. A calming music plays as you traverse the lands of Skyrim. You come across a door and begin to explore. What untold riches you will find in this dungeon, except first thing to greet you is an undead creature with pale gray flesh and eyes that glow blue like the sea. It charges you with a sword and gives off a grunt that sounds like your dad choking at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You slay the beast and try to read its name. Droger? There's no vowel there, Droger. You've unlocked a new ability. Dyslexia. Okay, so maybe that was my story, but the Droggers are the focus here. Skyrim is heavily influenced by Norse mythology. Dreadr is one of those things. They were undead creatures that would protect the tombs and graves from looters, as a lot of the warriors at the time were buried with such valuables. And yes, when I go into dungeons, I tip over everything. The pots, the wall, I check everything, gotta check everything. Number 1, Valkyries. Oh yes, the beautiful Valkyries. For such a gorgeous image, they have a rather grim job. Whenever someone falls in battle, it's up to these ladies to guide them to the afterlife. In a way, they're kind of like battle angels. It literally translates to chooser of the slain. I hope you folks have been praying towards Odin, otherwise you won't be able to make it to Valhalla, which is bad, because that's where all the good little Viking men and women go. You want to go there, so they can be with their ancestors and eat and drink meat all day, and you want that. I know you do.
Kicking off the list at number 10, black cats. Yeah, we'll start this dark list off a little slowly. You know, we'll ease our way into the witch trials. You see a black cat cross in front of you, what's the first thing you think? Bad luck, bad omens, bad stuff? Does that cat belong to anyone? Maybe I should take it home and take care of it. Well, in 1232, Pope Gregory IX, he exposed a cult of witches in northern Germany. Yeah, he wrote an expose called Vox in Rama. He went in deep. He knew some of the ritual words used at these cult meetings. He knew everything, which, in my opinion, a little fishy, right? This guy knows a lot. Were you involved, my dude? What's going on? He exposed the happenings, including the involvement of one black cat. They would oddly kiss it and worship it. Now, at first, when reading about this, I was like, oh no, the cat, what's gonna happen? No, it's good. It was cat worship in this way, which is odd, but better historically. The Pope did afterwards send hunters out to eliminate any cat in sight, so it is pretty dark and scandalous. The level of cats in the mid-1200s was almost at an extinct level. Pretty horrible, right? If only we had all those cats later on in 1347 when, you know, rats carrying the Black Death arrived. We definitely could have used a few cats, but witches. Number 9, flat earth. Okay, it's 2022. We can watch live footage right now from the International Space Station just whipping around us. We can fly to Australia in this day and age. We can have a window seat and watch the entire commute. But there's still a good amount of people today that believe that the earth is flat. How shocking is that? How scandalous indeed. The same guys who believed women were witches were also like, Oh, of course the Earth isn't flat. That's crazy. How conflicting is that historically? We think any time before Columbus, especially back in the Dark Ages, we have this general idea that they didn't know anything, specifically the scale of the planet or even the universe for that matter. We're still launching telescopes into space to record the edges of the galaxy. There's so much we don't know today, yet there's still flat earthers. Shocking enough, the Middle Ages didn't see many of those. In the 13th century, navigators were regarding the Earth as a sphere, with 4 cardinal points as well. Even going back further, looking at ancient Roman days, in 77 AD, Pliny the Elder, the ancient philosopher, also agreed on the Earth's shape. It was common knowledge, dare I say, even in the Dark Ages. So if you know any flat earthers, send them this link, and then also send them a link of the ISS. I don't know. Number 8, red hair problems. Alright, if you're a redhead out there, I'm sorry about this one. I had to talk about it. History can be ugly sometimes, and more often than not, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Historically, urine has been used for the greater good. Teeth whitening, Roman laundry days, urine makes leather soft. We get it. The Spanish Inquisition brought with them the idea that red hair was a sign of witchcraft. Yeah, the sign of the devil himself. The manuscripts published at that time about redheads too didn't help. They were horrible. The Proverbs of Alfred warns against having a redhead as a friend. And then another manuscript, Secretum Secretorum, warns against using redheads as advisors. Yeah, not even a work friend. Sorry, Big Chud. 14th century manuscripts tell me that you're working for the devil, so now we can't talk to you, all because you have nice hair. Another manuscript from the 14th century believes that redheads are rarely faithful in both friendships and romantic relationships. Yeah, if you have a redhead partner, don't go through their phone, okay? Don't listen to the Spanish Inquisition, okay? Don't listen to the devil. They're not working for the devil, okay? They're just fine. They're redheads. Freckles as well. If you had freckles in the Middle Ages, good game. Number 7, Macbeths Curse. Every curse starts somewhere, okay? All you theater kids out there probably know about this one. I feel guilty talking about this. Here we go. There's a few things you can't say to an actor before a show, and oddly enough, good luck is one of them. Yeah, you're supposed to say break a leg. All these theater traditions you can't break, okay? You're about to go on and do Shakespeare and do like this huge monologue wearing funky shoes. You gotta be in the zone, okay? You gotta, you know, it's like game day. Even actors have their playoff beards, you know what I mean? It's like a ritual, you gotta stick to it. This legend goes back to 1606, the time of Macbeth's first performance. The actor playing Lady Macbeth died right before the show, sadly, so Shakespeare had to step in and play the part himself. Now apparently at this time, a coven of witches cursed the show. Yeah, since then there's been tales of real daggers being used in the show accidentally instead of prop daggers. The Astor Place riot in New York City back in 1849, that was caused by rival actors both playing Macbeth in their respective productions. There's also countless amount of stories recalling botched performances of the play, but what do we think? Is this the case of being in your own head and we just never dropped it, or is the Macbeth curse real? I don't know. Coven of witches cursing plays. That sounds pretty medieval. I hope it's not real. That would suck. I just got cursed. Number 6, Witches' Curse. More curses. Let's do it. From the 1400s to the 1700s alone, there were around 50,000 individuals who were all found guilty of witchcraft and wizardry. And we all know what that meant. But how many of those were actual witches? Like really, was this a real thing? Were any of them actually found guilty? Was any of them the Red Woman from Game of Thrones? Like, you know, did she do anything? We'll start with a woman named Mother Shipton. Mother Shipton, aka Ursula Southiel. She was a clairvoyant from the 16th century, England's greatest, if that. Her mother as well was a widely known witch, which is a little dark. But Ursula, she was good at her job. She was often compared to Nostradamus, so she was using her passed on abilities for the greater good. Again, greater good, the Middle Age greater good. She predicted the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, and she also predicted the internet. Yeah, in the 16th century, she predicted that thoughts around the world shall fly in the twinkling of an eye. It rhymed, so you know she was on a good streak. Mother Shipton actually passed away a peaceful death, believe it or not. She wasn't hunted down by a mob or anything like that. She was actually buried on unholy grounds in 1561, which is insanely bizarre for a witch at any time. And the fact that people compared her to Nostradamus and she wasn't, you know, shocking. Dare I say, we have a good one. A nice good one for a halfway point.
Alright, number 5, the Great Whiskey Fire. Now we talked about the molasses explosion. This is kind of similar, but also I can't believe it. I love when bartenders set your drink on fire like they're magicians. But the Great Whiskey Fire is nowhere close to an outstanding whiskey sour dressed up in a coupe. In Dublin in 1875, 5,000 barrels of whiskey were ignited and made a river of fire in the streets of Dublin. The fire started at Malone's Malt House on Chamber Street, where the barrels were being stored. Once the fire touched the barrels, obviously they exploded into a whiskey lava river of death. Unless you love a hot toddy, that is. I know a hot toddy's made with rum. I just, you could also use whiskey. Anyways, all you could basically do was run. It was like, it set fire to everything it touched. Water, sand, gravel were all useless against it, so Captain James Robert Ingram, the head of the fire brigade, suggested horse manure, and miraculously that worked, but imagine the smell. It was the most destructive fire in the history of Dublin, and 13 people died. As terrifying as this sounds, no one died from burns or suffocation from smoke inhalation. As the city was succumbing to the fire, crowds gathered around the pool of whiskey with pots, pans, hats, and boots to collect some for themselves. The people that did die died because they got alcohol poisoning from drinking the contaminated whiskey from the street. I shouldn't laugh at that, I'm sorry. You can't make this stuff up. It's one of the reasons Irish and whiskey go hand in hand. I mean, what? Don't drink whiskey that's a lava street covered in horse manure. Don't do that.
At number 4, blue eyes. The 1986 Chernobyl disaster is one of, if not the worst, nuclear disaster in history. The explosion was caused by a flawed reactor that was being operated on by inexperienced workers. The initial disaster took the lives of 31 people, and almost 500,000 people were evacuated from the area. So many lives were affected by the disaster and the intense nuclear radiation. The firefighters who battled the fires from the explosion were some of the most affected by the radiation, and it's almost unbelievable what happened to their physical appearances because of the exposure. According to records, their skin started peeling off and their eyes turned bright blue. One of the Chernobyl firefighters who was affected by the nuclear radiation had his eyes go from dark brown to light blue. He was so heavily affected by the radiation that when he was buried, he was put into a coffin sealed with zinc to counteract the radiation.
Alright, this one's super cute and you might die, so get ready. Number 3, Sergeant Stubby. I already know this movie is gonna make me cry. Dogs, man. If dogs are in movies, I'm done. We really don't deserve dogs, okay? We don't. Sergeant Stubby was actually a real heroic doggo. While training for combat in 1917, Private Robert Conroy found a little brindle puppy with a short tail. He named him Stubby, and little did he know that he would become a decorated war hero. Stubby became their mascot for the 26th Yankee Division 102 Infantry. He learned bugle calls, the drills, and even like a little doggy salute. He would lift his right paw and just salute his head, and was the only animal allowed at camp. Conroy snuck him aboard the SS Minnesota, and the crew was won over by him, obviously, because he was so cute. How could you not? They brought him to the front lines, and Stubby saved life after life. He woke soldiers during a gas attack, he rescued fallen soldiers on the battlefield by following the sound of English calls. He could distinguish the languages, even captured an enemy spy. After this incident, he was promoted to Sergeant Stubby. Because how can you not? He captured an enemy spy, he did his job. Sergeant Stubby served and survived 17 battles, staying with Conroy even until after the war. He finally passed away in 1926, his service complete.
Alright, at number 2, Hubert the Hippo. You've probably never heard of Hubert the Hippo, South Africa's most famous hippo, so I'm going to tell you about her and what made her so extraordinary. In 1928, Hubert the Hippo walked 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles, traveling from her home in the St. Lucia estuary to East London. Huberta became quite the celebrity on her journey as she drew in large crowds of people wanting to see her and give her food. Along her journey, she even stopped at a country club, a theater, and even the beach. After failing to capture Huberta, she was officially declared royal game, meaning no one could harm her. Sadly, however, just a month after arriving in East London, she was shot by a couple of farmers. People were so upset that these farmers harmed Huberta that they demanded their arrest. The farmers were arrested and fined £25, which was a lot back then because it was the Great Depression. Huberta's body was given to a taxidermist in London, and in 1932, Huberta's body was sent back to South Africa, where thousands of people gathered to welcome her home.
Number 1, last but not least, Ching Chi. I love Pirates of the Caribbean. It's my jam. Pirate!
Yeah.
Before I knew how bad pirates would actually smell in real life, Jack Sparrow. Loved him, but really couldn't get like 6 feet next to him. He would have smelled so bad. But a movie series seriously needs to be made about Ching Chi. Her story is incredible. She became known as the Terror of South China due to her massive fleet of over 50 to 70,000 pirates. She started out working as a woman of the night until one night she met Ching Chi, the pirate captain who ruled over the Red Flag fleet. The captain proposed to her and she said yes under the condition that they would share the power of the fleet and the plunder. Together, they launched a fleet of over 1,800 ships. They were highly organized, ruthless, and disciplined. Sadly, 6 years into their marriage, her husband died, leaving Ching Chi alone to rule. She ran a tight ship, handing out fierce punishments to all those who disobeyed her orders. She was strict with her prisoners, keeping her men in check should any woman be taken in. Should they take a wife? Fine, but they had to remain faithful. If they didn't, well, dead. If they took a woman against her will, dead. Any who deserted would be hunted down and tortured, then killed. The Red Fleet eventually felt like a floating country, even routinely taxing villages. The Chinese government eventually realized they couldn't defeat her. They were so scared, so instead of going to battle, they made a bargain. A bargain that allowed her to retire to wherever she liked with all of her riches and her new bow. So, it's good to be a pirate queen.
Number 10. Albert. Adam, how is Queen Victoria's marriage to Prince Albert bizarre? Well, my little honeybees, not to be a pessimist, but it's bizarre because they actually really did love each other. Be honest, how often do you think it occurred that people of royal or noble birth actually got to marry someone they genuinely loved? On February 10th, 1840, Queen Victoria married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, who, interestingly, was her first cousin, and who was actually kind of not the favorite of the British people who saw him as an outsider. As queen, she was the one to propose. Good for you, Queen. Literally. The couple stayed married for 21 years until Albert died of typhoid in 1861, and together the couple had 9 children. 9. Even after his death, Queen Victoria continued to make ruling decisions based on the principle of what would Albert do? Such a nice way to start this heinous list.
Number 9. Napoleonic Wars. Okay, a little bit of a stretch, but I would argue the Victorian era lasted from about 1814 to 1914. There's no specific date, but it could be classified around this time. The Napoleonic Wars were essentially world wars started by one man, the Corsican ogre. Hello. Imagine having the whole world against you. No, really, the whole world against you. Britain, Prussia, Russia, Austria, and sometimes Italy took part in the coalition wars, which were just part of Napoleon's story. Trust me, this dude was arrogant and he was the antagonist of the story. He's been labeled as the greatest tactician ever. When it was all said and done, he had rediscovered ancient Egypt, fought many battles, and managed to become emperor. And he got banished twice.
8. Mummy unwrapping parties. What is your favorite idea of a get-together? Let me know down below, I won't judge, I promise. Unless, of course, you say mummy unwrapping parties like some people in the Victorian era might have. Then I will indeed judge you. Thanks to the Napoleonic Wars making their way to Egypt, interest in the country was on the up and up. And while people have been buying mummies since the Elizabethan era, now these rich weirdos bought even more, bringing them back as souvenirs. Once they got to the homestead, they would almost instantly hold parties with all their rich friends where they would unwrap their mummies like a Christmas present. Congratulations! It's exactly what you thought it would be! A 5,000 or 6,000 year old decaying corpse that smells horrible. Why are rich people like this? I don't get it.
Number 7. Fire hazard Christmas. Like all families at Christmas, we all have our traditions. I'm a good boy all year, so Santa can bring me lots of gifts. Thanks, Santa. My family tradition is to watch the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation every year. I love that movie. Adam, on the other hand, well, he's a bad boy, and he eats all the chocolate out of his advent calendar before it's time. Don't tell him I said anything, though.
I can't help it. I'm sorry.
He's right there. However, one family Christmas tradition was quite popular back in Victorian times, oftentimes called Snapdragon. The basis of this game was to get a large bowl, fill it with dad's brandy, and drop some large raisins in said bowl. Next, get a candle or a match and light it up. Now that there's a large cauldron of flaming liquid and fireballs in your living room, now your objective is to try and knock the raisins out of the dish without getting burned. Fun for the whole family, why not? Just be mindful, that the whole house is made of wood and there's no fire alarms and there's no modern firefighting equipment and everyone's wearing long gowns and you get the point.
Number 6. Maybe we were apes? November 24th, 1859 marks the day that none other than Charles Darwin published the famous and even infamous On the Origin of Species, presenting his theory of natural selection and questioning the theory of creation. Truly a great day in my opinion. Look, we can talk evolution versus creation in the comment, but there is no denying the evidence presented in On the Origin of Species had people turning heads and questioning everything they thought they knew. Its full title, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life, kinda explains it, but basically, Charles' book gave us the idea that species evolve over generations through the process of natural selection, which he backed up with evidence from the Beagle expedition in the 1830s, which to my disappointment had nothing to do with the dog breed beagles.
Number 5, athlete juice. Speaking of gross, this one is straight out of Johnny Knoxville's playbook. Shout out to those guys. I hope one day I'm cool enough and famous enough to meet them. Maybe do a bit. Chetty's knuckin' fut, so I'm down. Anyway, back to the Greeks. Remember when I said the Greek bodybuilders like to oil up? Well, so did the athletes. Here's where it gets gross. After days of events and running around in the dirt, naked with olive oil, these athletes wouldn't always bathe. But why? Well, the answer is marketing. Just like Gatorade commercials of the early 2000s, these athletes were covered in juice. This sludge was scraped off in what I'm sure was a very humanizing experience and jarred up to be sold like a superhero serum for the average Joe Schmo to drink or rub on themselves. This mixture was called Gloios. No thank you. I will pass. Number 4, Nocturne Toten. It was 2008. I was alone in the dark one summer night. There, illuminating my poor innocent face, was Call of Duty World at War, the latest action-packed Hollywood blockbuster FPS from Activision. Now, I always finish campaigns first before moving on to multiplayer. Just when I thought it was over, a new cutscene started playing, except this one was different. It was dark, and the camera was shaky, and that's when I saw them, twisted and screeching undead, sprinting at me. I have never turned off a console so fast in all my life. Well, it seems the ancient Greeks shared this fear as well. To prevent zombies eating their very smart brains, the Greeks oftentimes buried folks with heavy stuff on top of them, just to prevent them from climbing out of their graves. That's the smartest people on earth, and they think the zombies are gonna come get them. That's crazy. Guys, come on. Number 3, diluted wine. The Greeks were well known for their artisan goods and foods. Their wine is no different. Some good stuff out there. However, did you know that Greeks would dilute their wine with a little H2O? Drinking wine pure was sometimes considered to be an unholy act, as it was said it could make a man unruly. Well, they're not too far off from the truth on that one actually. Drinking too much wine can make you go a little silly. So yeah, diluting it kinda makes sense. Sometimes during hot weather, if it was available, snow was added for a cool and refreshing drink on the hot Greek island days. That sounds kind of nice, kind of like an ice spritzer, a Greek ice wine spritzer. How nice, wow. Number 2, the finger. The ultimate hand gesture. I know you're gonna have to blur it out or not even put it in, but here we go, that's what I'm talking about. The ultimate hand gesture. It starts with a, hey, I'm walking here, and ends with a simple finger in the air. It's been used for centuries and will probably be used for many more. Ever wondered where the origins of the most powerful hand gesture besides Darth Vader's force choke come from? Well, the almighty gesture has its origins in ancient Greece. Who would have thought? While no one is 100% sure the exact origins of it, we know it was used back then and it was around. The very interesting Diogenes was known to use it against those passing by he was distasteful of. He didn't like a lot of people. Maybe it was because it was simple, phallic, or just kind of strange. But at the end of the day, we all know what it means. Number 1, mud bath. I know Steve-O has literally done something like this before, and if there's rules you should write this one down, this second, right now, write it down. Be kind to one another, and work hard in life. And never do anything ever that Steve-O has ever done. Those are really good rules. Trust me, it's good words to live by. So what exactly am I talking about? Well, in ancient Greece, for those who could afford it and had the time, they needed to relax. I need to relax. They needed the spa treatment. Heck, I've never even been to a spa. Someone take me. The ancient Greeks loved mud baths, and from what I hear, it's actually got quite a lot of benefits to it. However, the Greeks added one secret ingredient. One piece of the Krabby Patty formula I know most of us would say no to, even Plankton. Crocodile dung. Oh god. Yes, that's right. They bathed in hot crocodile refuse. It's great for the skin, apparently. So much so, it was thought it had beautifying and restorative properties. Go ahead then. Jump right in, guys. Water's fine. Come on in. Number 10, Ragnarok. I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. Yes, the end of times. It's all over. So long as I'm here for your entertainment, everything is going to be okay. Ragnarok is the prediction of end times. All ancient civilizations did this. Maybe we just like talking about it. Maybe we just like thinking we're all doomed. Maybe we're just all a little emo. Who knows? I don't know. Ragnarok is slightly different from other world-ending predictions, as instead of one event, it's a series of events that signals the beginning of the end times. As a gamer, it was kind of like watching Call of Duty fall off. Things were great in Black Ops 2. Things were good. Lots of good maps, fun weapons, perks. It was great. But then they added jetpacks, and you knew it was the beginning of the end. A good thing we never get close to that in real life though, right? Everything's fine. It's good right now. It's good. Number 9, Boulder. If you know your myths and your ancient stories, then you know that there's some stories that are very different from culture to culture. However, there's also a lot of similarities. The story of Balder is both. Very similar to Achilles, that is. A dude has been given the gift of invulnerability. I am invincible. Pretty sick. Achilles had a weakness. It was his heel. And Balder, well, it was a mistletoe. Every guy has his weakness, but yeah, it was a mistletoe. And Loki made a dart out of it, and then the dart got thrown at him, and then everyone was sad. It was kind of a mess, and yada yada. I'm sure this won't have any effect in our world. Why is the ground shaking? Number 8, Loki. Lord of the Tricks, the god of mischief. Everyone knows who Loki is, most likely due to some very successful superhero movies in the last few years. But the sane may know him regardless, known for many tricks and evil deeds. His best trick, or whatever you want to call it, was his shape-shifting. Loki has the ability to transform into any creature and any gender. And for the people who don't have the ability to see through these tricks, it often leads to a lot of misfortune. Like previously mentioned with Balder. The dude was up to a lot of bad stuff. Bad stuff. Now he's a superhero, or supervillain actually. Number 7, Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is the immense and central anchor that is the Norse worlds, surrounded by the 9 worlds, that is, where the gods often meet to talk about god stuff, which is really important, deliberating and all that fun stuff. The tree shares a connection with that of trees in Germanic paganism, culturally speaking, at least. I mean, come on, you can't blame them. There is something powerful about a large stoic tree that has connections and ties to all the realms. It's almost like they knew how important trees were all the way back then. Kinda needed them to breathe. And for a guy with asthma, that's that's pretty important. I gotta breathe. Do I go up a flight of stairs and I'm just I don't even smoke either. Number 6, Thor's Hammer. Probably the most recognizable piece of Norse mythology is Thor's thick and heavy hammer. Yes, that was an innuendo. It's a big one. Loki had been getting up to no good, as per usual, no surprise there, and decided to play some more tricks. These tricks got him into some trouble, so he then thought he'd make it up by playing more tricks on the master smiths, the dwarves. Not really a good thought process there. A competition was put in place to see who could make the best gifts for the gods. After a lot of gold and a boat that would fit in your pocket, everyone else was kind of just feeling meh, nothing special. However, that was until the reveal of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Nice. That had the crowds oohing and awing. A hammer that would never shatter, always hit its mark, and return to Thor when thrown. Now that's a pretty good hammer.
Number 5, the Reformation. As if Europe wasn't already going through it, how about a little bit of religious civil war? In 1521, Augustinian monk Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses, basically accusing the Catholic Church of corruption. Most heresies at the time were quietly smothered, but this one was a bit more of a problem thanks to Frederick III of Saxony protecting Luther and bringing about the Reformation. Some may say that this isn't exactly a bad thing, and I feel like people believing whatever they want should be perfectly fine, but at the time, Lutheranism got political and was an awesome excuse to confiscate the Catholic Church's land holdings in Central Europe and Scandinavia, making their rulers rich and giving them enough money to oppose Habsburg dominance. So yeah, sounds totally awesome. Number 4, witch trials. Do you know what else the Reformation did for the world? It successfully brought witch hunting to Central Europe for 200 years! Yay! What's a good way to get rid of anyone who does some stuff you can't explain, don't like, or consider unholy? Accuse them of witchcraft. Oh, they won't admit to being a witch? Let's deprive them of sleep and do heinous things to them until they admit it, because that must make it true. This all really kicked off in 1486 when Heinrich Kramer wrote the Hammer of Witches, which basically said, witchcraft's getting bad, we should step up the punishments. Which is pretty bad when you know that, not too much later, Enlightenment rationalism became a thing, which basically denied the existence of magic and therefore witches and witchcraft. Number 3. Burning Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, the patron saint of France. She claimed she was the prophesied savior of France. She led an army to save the besieged city of Orleans, and she helped to see the prince at the time crowned as King Charles VII. What did she get in return for all this? She was captured by the Anglo-Burgundians and put on trial for 70 different charges, including witchcraft, heresy, and dressing like a man. And after a year of captivity, she was forced to sign a confession that she had never received divine guidance like she had claimed. If all that wasn't bad enough, on the 30th of May in 1431, at the age of 19, she was burned at the stake in the marketplace of Rouen. Luckily, 20 years after her death, Charles VII would get her name cleared, and in 1902, Pope Benedict XV canonized her. Number 2. Pirates. While Europe wasn't exactly a very stable place, it was an incredibly wealthy place. And where there is wealth, there are people who make it their goal to forcefully take that wealth. That's right, pirates. North African pirates frequently targeted Catholic Italy, Spain, and Malta in search of captives to sell in Ottoman markets. Harridan Barbarossa and his brother Ursa Ali achieved notoriety in the Mediterranean for sacking the Balearic Islands, robbing Spanish treasure ships, and successfully attacking southern Italy. Christian states such as the Knights of Malta also captured people by raiding Muslim shipping routes and ports. None of this was particularly great for anyone. Captured men were held for ransom or used and sold as labor, but as always seems to be the case, and as I'm sure you can imagine, captured women got the worst of it. Number 1. The Bubonic Plague. To top our lovely list of happenings, we have a lovely little thing called the Bubonic Plague. The Black Death ran rampant all over Europe, being carried on fleas that traveled on rodents from roughly 1350 to 1450. This wasn't anything like the pandemic we're dealing with today. This sickness was almost always fatal, and it took out like half of the population of Europe. Since the disease was worse in big cities, which makes sense, the best solution was to move out into the country. That's great, but the only people that could do that were the ones who were wealthy enough to afford it. As you can imagine, the massive loss of life did not bode too well for the economy either. A huge chunk of consumer population just didn't exist anymore. After the plague had pretty much gone away, there was a steep rise in population, think like baby boomers, and that helped bring things back to normal.
At number 10, 18-month winter. If you live anywhere that gets harsh winters, then you know how annoying that it can be. Living in Canada, we know that all too well, and I can personally say that I despise winter. It basically lasts 6 months out of the year. If a 6-month winter sounds bad, then imagine how horrible an 18-month winter would be. In 1536 BCE, winter lasted a whole 18 months. Based on archaeological records, a thick dust veil and darkened skies caused temperatures to drop significantly in Europe and parts of Asia. This created some pretty frosty summers and harsh winters for those living in the area at the time. It is believed that this was all caused by a volcanic eruption that shot dust particles into the air, and they didn't dissipate for a long time. This phenomenon wasn't just a minor inconvenience to people though, and it greatly impacted the lives of many. It is believed that about a third of Europe's population was wiped out, and death rates soared to about 90% in northern regions. It was quite the catastrophe.
Alright, number 9, Andrew Jackson. You know when you get so frustrated with someone, you just like take over and like do it yourself? You're like, come on, just let me do it. Well, that's probably exactly what went through Andrew Jackson's brain when he was about to be assassinated because it was so poorly done. He survived 2 point-blank assassination attempts by the same guy, seconds apart. It was a cold, wet day in January in 1835, and Richard Lawrence waited behind a pillar inside the Capitol Rotunda. The aging president was there to attend a funeral, of all things, and Lawrence wanted to add one more body. He leapt from behind the pillar and fired. A loud bang went off, but the powder failed to ignite. Fail number 1. Andrew was not pleased, and despite his aging form, he was using a cane. He went at him with said cane. Lawrence quickly grabbed another pistol, and the same thing happened again. Misfire. Wow. You got so close, dude, and you really messed that up. During the trial, it was confirmed that Lawrence was indeed insane and thought he was the true King of England. And according to him, the only thing standing in his way to achieving like true power was Andrew Jackson.
At number 8, Boston Toffee Apple Tsunami. Imagine a great wave of sticky syrup flooding your town. What would you do? Run? Hide? Have a quick snack? Well, for people in Boston in 1915, they didn't have enough time to think about those things when the Boston Toffee Apple Tsunami happened. On January 15, 1915, a 90-foot wide cast iron cask full of 2.5 million gallons of molasses suddenly exploded. The explosion caused a wall of molasses to shoot about 15 feet high at around 35 miles per hour. This sticky situation ended up destroying buildings, carried vehicles, and even drowned people and their horses. It is said that the Boston Toffee Apple Tsunami killed about 21 people and injured 150. As people started to come into the hospital after the incident, witnesses recalled the victims looking like toffee apples, which is where the name for the event came from. It took the city weeks to clean up the molasses, but even for years following the incident, people said that they could still smell the molasses in the air on a hot day.
Number 7, the big package. Okay, so technically this didn't happen, but it almost did. And the fact that it was even in the works, the fact that someone even thought of this and was like, yeah, that'll show the Russians. So ridiculous. No one really won the Cold War, but everyone has their perspective. But even today, the tensions between America and Russia are like pretty taut. Rather than all-out trench warfare, the Cold War consisted of espionage and psychological warfare on both sides. The CIA had many plans, and one of them may surprise you. In the 1950s, Frank Wisner took over the OPC, the central part of the CIA. He sketched out the idea of how to really emasculate the Russians. Under his leadership, they drafted out a plan to drop massive condoms labeled medium to make them think that the US was superior to them, all based on the size of their John Thomases. Because when it comes to deciding whether or not to nuke another country, size matters. They would make the Russians bow to their superior sexual prowess of American men. Oh, sorry, I just almost knocked myself out with that eye roll. Whoa. Needless to say, the plan never came to fruition.
At number 6, Rabbit Army. Weird question, but if you had to choose one animal to fight an army of, which animal would you choose? Well, whatever you choose, make sure it's not rabbits, because as fun as you think an army of rabbits might be, apparently they can be quite fearsome. In 1807, after signing the treaties of Tilsit, Napoleon wanted to celebrate a bit and he wanted to organize a rabbit hunt. He asked his chief of staff to organize the hunt, and apparently he went way overboard with the bunnies. Instead of rounding up a couple dozen rabbits, this man said, "Oh, you want rabbits? Alright, bet." And he got 3,000 rabbits. 3,000 rabbits! The rabbits were released into an open field for the hunt, and people thought that they would just flee and run away. But instead, the rabbits ganged up on Napoleon and his crew, and the bunnies charged at them. But don't worry, these bunnies didn't have a vengeance. They were just trying to make friends. You see, the chief of staff ended up getting tame farm rabbits, and they were already used to humans, so they just wanted to say hi. But could you imagine those first few moments of having 3,000 rabbits chasing after you?
Number 5, Sisyphus. Oh baby, do I feel this one. Story of my life, honestly, day late and a dollar short. Some of you folks at home may also share the same fate as me and this chiseled Greek man doomed for eternity. This one is also one of my favorites. Basically, Sisyphus was cheating the devil. Cheating death itself, actually. After sliming his way out of the underworld one too many times, Big Daddy Zeus had to intervene. Also, when I say I relate to him, it's not because I'm a trickster who cheats my demise or cheats the devil or Hades. I'll explain. So, after Sisyphus had done what he'd done, Zeus sentenced him to roll a giant boulder up a hill for eternity. When he gets to the top, she rolls back down to the bottom and he has to start all over again. Every day for the rest of time. Not just life, for time. Sometimes in life it feels like you're on a grind and you work and work and work, and sometimes you go right back to square one no matter how hard you work. That sucks and that can be exhausting, but never give up, because Chetty ain't, and neither should you. Number 4, King Midas. The lesson in this one, folks, is to be careful what you wish for. King Midas was being granted a wish. He wished for anything I touch be turned to gold. Now, I'm not an economist because I already have too many jobs on the internet, but you can imagine how at today's rate of gold, how wealthy you would be. Sheesh! Yeah, gold was valuable back then, but now, wowie. So his wish was granted, and everything he touched turned to gold, which, for a good couple hours, must have been the most fun anyone has ever had, ever. Dude was seeing drachma signs. However, this wealthy gift he had been given quickly turned into a curse, or a burden. Everything he touched turned to gold. That included his food. Because of this, he starved. To fix this burden, he bathed in a river, and it said that's why gold can be found in that river. I wouldn't mind having that power myself, but if I made food gold, or even worse, what if I made my beer gold? Number 3, Narcissus. This one's in the name. Basically, there was a guy named Narcissus, and he was gorgeous. Like George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Ryan Reynolds gorgeous, all put together. Oh. And he knew it, and he loved his image. Now, as a guy who goes on camera every day, naturally, you hate yourself. You hate your self-image. That's how it goes. Ask anyone here, they would tell you the same thing. But also, as someone who's on camera every day and funny from time to time, you kind of like yourself on camera, and you kind of like your self-image. It's a very strange relationship we have. However, no one is as bad as it comes to as Narcissus. One day in the forest, he came across a body of water where he saw his reflection cast, and it was so handsome, so gorgeous, that he couldn't look away. Ever. Hence the name Narcissist, or Narcissist. Or what most girls in high school find out what their boyfriends have. Narcissism. Ladies, let me know. Have you ever dated someone who has narcissism or looked in the mirror too long? Let me know, I'm curious. Number 2, Medusa. I feel like a lot of people know this one. Medusa, the half beautiful lady, half head of snakes in her head, and half monster thing with powers. Yes, I realize that was 3 halves and that doesn't add up, but you're talking to a guy who was voted class clown in the high school yearbook and not voted most likely to succeed in math. Because I just wouldn't. But she was the Gorgon monster who would turn men into stone. I do know that. If they looked into her eyes. That wasn't until your boy Perseus showed up like Link with a mirror shield and gave her a taste of her own medicine. What's the lesson on this one? I'm not sure. Maybe it's don't be so sure of your abilities. Maybe it's seeing things through. Or maybe it's having an extensive knowledge of tactics from a late 90s Nintendo character. That you never know when you're going to need that. You never know. I know that stuff. That can come in handy. Number 1, Pandora's Box. I know you guys know this one, but this one is so simple. At first glance, it's not about turning things into gold or weird snakehead ladies or giants rising from beneath the earth to fight each other. It's a box. Something ain't good in that box, but it's just a box. So don't open it. I'm gonna say it again because there's gonna be people in the comment section that are gonna say, but Chetty, because you said don't open it, that means I really wanna open it. Imagine I'm Robert De Niro telling you not to open it. Nope, no way. Nope, not gonna happen. Nope, null and void. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's how you know I'm serious, because I did a bad impression. Oh great, somebody open it. Yes, that's right, Pandora's box was opened and it said that all the evils of the world were released from the box. Good tale, good moral, but who the heck thought putting all those evil things in the world in the box was a great idea? Whatever happened to just having memento boxes? You know, you open up a thing like this is the time I farted on camera, this is the time I went to the cottage, you know what I mean? Whatever happened to that?
Number 10, Great Death Pit. If you were a Sumer king, you likely professed yourself a god and or a superhuman demigod. As such, your followers and members of court were required to treat you as such, with a level of devotion Andrew saves only for his collection of empty drink bottles he keeps at his desk. Can you please clean that up?
Hey!
What I'm sure Andrew doesn't expect from those empty bottles is that when he bites the dust, they too must do the same to accompany him to the afterlife. Sumerian kings absolutely did. The biggest example of this ritualistic offing would be the Great Pit of Delifing, discovered in 1922, which was the resting place of approximately 1,800 people, all of which served different kings and queens in the Sumerian capital city of Ur. Some of these followers may have been poisoned, others had a less than ceremonious demise as they had prominent holes in what should be rather intact parts of their skulls.
Number 9, Hanging Gardens. Here's a quote from Greek philosopher Strabo. The ascent to the highest stories by stairs, and at their side are water engines, by means of which persons appointed expressly for the purpose and are continually employed in raising water from the Euphrates into the garden. Namaste. Yes, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon! I said it twice, oh my goodness, must be kinda cool. What a magnificent sight it must have been, a magnificent construction of beauty. even predating the pyramids of Giza by a rough estimate of 5,000 years. We'll get to that later. Trouble is, this one is kind of a gray area. Here's the later. It could be completely made up by Strabo and others like him, or it could have been destroyed, as there are some depictions of a garden existing in a grand palace on the river Tigris near modern day Mosul, but we're just not sure. We're not exactly sure. So, beautiful gardens, I hope they were there.
Number 8. Sumer. The Sumerians were the oldest known civilization in Mesopotamia. They created the first cities, and a large part of their success and the success of the Mesopotamians in general was due to the invention of irrigation. The land around the Tigris and Euphrates was not so great. It was fertile but prone to flooding pretty often. The solution was to divert water from canals into irrigation ditches. The Mesopotamians realized that the water supply from rivers was unreliable, so they dug a maze of ditches from the rivers to their fields. This created a reliable water source for farming. The crops fed the population, and farmers were able to trade the excess produce such as onions, garlic, apples, figs, grapes, and pomegranates. That's how the Mesopotamians really flourished.
Number 7. Hammurabis Law. Law students and those taking the bar, rejoice, because I am talking about Hammurabi's Code. When folks were flocking into cities for the first time, the crime rate would have been something to take note of. Yeah. King Hammurabi made his code of laws, 282 to be exact, to give justice to all. Like in the commercial sector, for example, for those who steal. The principle of an eye for an eye, to make the punishment fit the crime. If you were caught stealing, then perhaps the removal of your arm that stole shall be an acceptable response. Now look, I'm not out here defending crooks. Don't steal, it's bad. But these laws, a little too cruel for me. I'd go through all of them, but well, you need to get back to your bar exam, so good luck out there, folks. I know you can do it.
Number 6. The Akkadian Empire. You know you're a big deal when it hasn't been done before you. The Akkadian Empire was literally the first ever empire. They were around for about 100 years and first came to be around 4,300 years ago. And they were big on improving roads and irrigation. Only problem is that irrigation doesn't really help you out much when it stops raining for 290 years. The large southern part of the empire was pretty dependent on the northern part for most, or more like all, of its crops and food. So when a drought struck and took away the food, a panicking northern population went to seek help from their southern brethren, who, in return for all the years of food, put up walls to keep them out. Boom! An inciting incident for a violent conflict that brings down an empire. It's that simple, kiddos.
Number 5. Cat attacks. If I had to pick, I would of course say I'm 100% a dog person. I'm sorry, I grew up with 2 cats, I'm allergic. I grew up with 2 dogs, not allergic. Dog guy all the way, sorry. Cats are cool, but this next story just totally freaked me out. Back in 1870, this rich woman had put her time, energy, and resources into cat breeding. How lovely is that? She had tons of cats, she loved all of them, and they loved her. Again, I'm allergic, so I'm already sneezing just reading about this story. It was the 1800s, okay? A lot of candles, everything was obviously extremely flammable, and disaster hit often in Victorian times. And in 1870, a fire broke out at this young woman's home. The cats were trapped inside the house. Now, they made it outside, don't freak out or anything, they all made it out, but by the time the 2 maids had kicked the door open to rescue said cats, they had gone full primal. They were afraid, they were freaking out, they were just scratching their way out through anyone and everything. The fire in the house had obviously scared them, so when the doors were open, these 2 maids were both sadly attacked by all of these cats. What a horrible thank you for saving all of their lives. I pulled my cat's tail when I was younger. I learned real quick, never to do that ever again. Number 4, hiccups. Today we have many cures for hiccups. Yeah, you gotta get scared or hold your breath or drink water like while you're doing a handstand. I don't know, everyone's got weird ideas, whatever. But nothing was as dangerous as the Victorian era hiccup cure. Yeah, ready for this one? Don't try it. This one's scarier than a jump scare, that's for sure. In 1899, again in the good old Merck medical manual, it recommended using chloroform to cure your hiccups. Yeah, just completely damage your entire nervous system and poison your kidneys, for sure. To get rid of hiccups, that's way better. This 19th century anesthetic was not a solution. Never try this. Continue scaring your family and friends. That's definitely the way we handle hiccups now. Number 3, tapeworms. Back in the Victorian times, they really figured out the trick to weight loss. Yeah, was it watching what you eat, maybe counting your steps, maybe getting a gym membership, something like that? Nope, nope, and no way. No, it was way easier than all those things combined. Can you believe that? And you didn't even have to pull back on how much you were consuming. Doesn't this sound fascinating? What is this? Well, all you needed was a handy tapeworm. Yep, I don't have one. I don't know why I pointed. That'd be gross if I had one. Yeah, tapeworm. You know those things that can kill you today if you get one? See, the plan was if you eat a tapeworm egg, okay, it will later hatch in your stomach, and at that point you could just eat anything you wanted. Because every time you ate, the tapeworm would also eat. So you could get your snack on while still rocking those Victorian skinny jeans, right? Tapeworm cyst pills, or go for a jog. Your call. Number 2, Victoria's reign. Queen Victoria's reign started in 1837 and it lasted until the Queen's death later on in 1901. At just age 18, Alexandrina Victoria had to rise up to the throne. She was born, of course, on May 24th, 1819. Queen Victoria was 5th in line when she was born, so right off the bat, it was actually highly unlikely that she would ever get the crown. Then one by one, out of nowhere, all of her family members began passing away suddenly. In 4 years, 3 of Victoria's cousins passed away, and then her father and grandfather both died a week apart from each other. So by the time 1830 rolled around, Victoria was only 11 years old, and already she was next in line for the throne. That's how fast it happens. So as if that wasn't already stressful enough, Victoria was brought up under the Kensington system, which if you haven't heard of before, it's pretty awful. Victoria's mother, Duchess Victoria of Kent, she created this Kensington system to control her daughter. She literally isolated the child from mates or family members, anything fun or social, you name it. Her mother did this to keep her pure, of course, to keep her the most pure lady. This system sounds awful. Her mother would monitor her every action, including who she can see or speak to. Victoria only had 2 playmates growing up. That's it. I'm like, hey, me too. She had her half-sister, Princess Fedora of Leamington, and the Duchess attendant Sir John Conroy, his daughter, Victoire. I mean, only 3 friends growing up, that's cruel. She shared a room with her mother until she was finally queen. Yeah, she couldn't walk down the hallway alone at any point. She had to always walk with her mother by her side, even to the washroom. That's crazy. Victoria has reflected on her childhood since, and yeah, she hates John Conroy for manipulating her mother, and she actually refers to him as Demon Incarnate, so that's good. It's a nice nickname. Incarnate? He's a demon. He's the worst. Let's just call him that. And finally, number 1, royal enemies. Being the queen and all, a security team is of course needed at all times. And during her reign, there were multiple attempts to harm the young Queen Victoria. The first attack was back in 1840. It was a young guy named Edward Oxford, and he attacked the Queen's carriage. Just ran at it like a crazy guy. Obviously, and thankfully, nothing happened. But when Edward was later accused of high treason, he was actually found not guilty due to insanity. Then a couple years later, in 1842, it happened again, but this time it was 2 men attacking the carriage. And then in 1849, her carriage was attacked by William Hamilton. In 1850, as the carriage was passing the gates of Buckingham Palace, Robert Pate, a retired soldier, ran up and hit the carriage with his cane. He was going nuts as well. Everyone wants this carriage. This is like the ultimate, no one's getting through this carriage apparently. Victoria was okay, luckily, but of course she was shook after all these events. Then again in 1842, 1849, 1872, attempt after attempt. It was horrifying. But then things got a little worse with a man named Boy Jones. Yeah, this guy stalked the Queen from 1838 until 1841. This guy somehow managed to break into Buckingham Palace more than once. He knew a way in just to Buckingham Palace, which should never be a thing in the first place. And the weird part is here, Boy Jones, once he was inside the palace, he would hide under the Queen's sofa. And he would also just sit on her throne for hours, just hanging out. Yeah, he would pretend he's Cersei Lannister and just sit on the throne for a minute or 2. Think about life. Eventually, thankfully, he got caught, but imagine coming home and Boy Jones is sitting on your couch. You're like, what are you doing? Take that shirt off, get out of here.
Number 10, Decemviri, the law of 12 tables. Well, actually the word means 10. 10 men, actually. Those special 10 would be the appointed men who would consider themselves the first ever lawmakers. The earliest attempts to create a code of law was the law of 12 tables. A commission of 10 men, are also known as the Decemviri, was appointed 455 BC to draw up a code of law-binding rules on both patrician and plebeian, which would be strictly enforced. Some of these laws included simple laws like, you don't break your word. If the army or king calls on you, you gotta go. And of course, if you hit or hurt someone, you get hit or hurt back. And you owe us some money. This system was the first in its place, holding people responsible for the things that they did and said in Rome. Strategic, fundamental, and important laws like, hey, no crying at funerals, alright? You burn my corn, I'm gonna burn your corn, and I get to burn you. And yeah, no meetings at night. It's dark. Okay, so they missed their mark on a couple of them, but a couple of those laws still stuck around.
Number 9, field surgery. The Romans were fierce on the battlefield, but they were also extremely handy. Who would have thought? This was the first time in history where quick surgeries were performed on the battlefield under the leadership of Augustus. Not Augustus Mayhew, it's a different Augustus, but he's also really helpful, like one time a year. Ancient Roman medics invented hemostatic tourniquets and surgical clamps. Yeah, guy invented clamps. Imagine that on a resume. Roman field doctors would also perform physicals on new warriors. Yeah, they would also combat the spread of disease. Although they were going to war and were constantly being patched up, the Roman military would often live longer than the average folk, because these military men were constantly being disinfected. They were checking their camps all day. Masks are hard in 2020, but the Romans were disinfecting the Colosseum. Nice, we'll get there one day. Maybe.
Number 8, the name Rome. We kinda got into this a little bit about those brothers Remus and Romulus. This barbaric history is loose and from many sources, so I'm gonna kinda sum it up into broad statements. Two brothers, didn't like each other, kept fighting, raised by a wolf and a bird. That's pretty much it. We have seen what these two have looked like. Every statue and painting of these two is always like one of them stone cold Steve Austining the other one. One built a wall and the other mocked him and jumped over that wall, and then there was only one. I feel like I made a sandcastle once and Taylor stepped on it, and I can absolutely see how the city was formed. Flawless victory. Yeah, that sounds like brotherly love to me. Rome deriving from its name Romulus, the victor in this legendary sibling quarrel, giving the city its official name. Hey, you got the god of war as your dad, and the mother of all gods and goddesses as your mom? There's gonna be some feeling of purpose just lingering around. Guess I could just like make a wall. And with a couple drywall holes later, with the death and defeat of his brother Remus, Romulus claimed his position as king and named the city after himself. Selfish much?
He ain't heavy, baby.
He's my brother.
Number 7, daily acts. In a time before Twitter or Facebook, how else do we get our fake news, right? How do we share our aunt's nonsense? How do we do it? 131 BC, this marked the first time a newspaper was ever used. Well, they're referred to as daily acts at this point, or acta diurna. The saying, written in stone, couldn't have been more historically accurate in this case. See these texts containing information on military or civil issues, death notices, gladiatorial events, you name it. These were commonly written on metal or stone. Your morning news etched into a stone. Imagine the crossword section in 131 BC. Hey honey, who's the neighbor in Simpsons? Flanders, nice, that's it. Ping, ping, is that an F? Ping. It took time and effort. It was exhausting just to get one notice out to the public. So you best take these notes seriously, okay? Imagine YouTube comments written in stone. Took a guy 6 business days to write it, so he meant it.
Number 6, Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a Roman general and statesman, a member of the first triumvirate. Caesar led the Roman armies in the Gallic Wars, which, well, we've seen and heard about these battles that Julius Caesar led. It's the organized outfit of shiny metal and red, moving slowly and swiftly through the Gauls like a man-made tank before defeating his political rival Pompey the Great, another military leader, and also the husband of Caesar's daughter Julia. Okay, there it is, yeah. That's why he became his nemesis. Political differences. Yeah. Due to these ongoing internal civil wars between the two leaders, Julius Caesar eventually killed Pompey in battle and became dictator of Rome. This was until his assassination in 44 BC. Oh, mighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low? Are all thy conquests, glories, triumphs, spoils shrunk to this little measure? Fairly well. Antony, Act 3, Scene 1. Hey man, eye for an eye. You read the rules. He played a crucial role in the events that led to the Roman Empire and remains one of the brightest and bravest military leaders the world has ever seen. His story can be seen and heard top to tail in William Shakespeare's play simply titled Julius Caesar.
Number 5, the League of Nations. World War I, she was a little bit of a doozy. Unlike some wars, World War I actually changed a lot after it was said and done. Borders changed, lines on maps, empires fell, some rose. Political ideas changed, and the history of Europe's future was sealed the second the ink dried on the Treaty of Versailles. After the nations who were involved with the war took stock of what happened, and it was clear we could never let this happen again. So the League of Nations was created. Beta UN, if you will. The idea was simple: peace, disarmament, and to step in when such horrific things were to ever happen again. I'm sure they won't. Well, the planning didn't go very well, and when it was finished, the US ultimately didn't decide to join when they were one of the founding members. Ooh. Mind you, the US had a different mindset on foreign wars back then, but they were still involved. The League dissolved shortly after the Second World War ended.
Number 4. Flappers. What a fun word to type in. In August 1920, history was forever changed when the 19th Amendment was passed, finally giving women the right to vote. Now look, in a list of ridiculous events, I'm adding this because it took a ridiculously long time to happen. Yeah, a little twist there for you. At first you're like, what? Relax. We're working. This was post-World War I, when women were still working all these jobs, high-paying jobs, might I add. So now there's no way they're gonna let those go. There's momentum in the workforce. So, come August 1920, American women got the right to vote officially. Then Margaret Sanger came along the same year, which led us to women's right to birth control. Lot of momentum. Like Big Ched mentioned earlier, Prohibition ended legal alcohol sales, but with jazz and women's independence post-war on the rise, you couldn't stop all this momentum, thus the flapper girl was introduced to American slang. Yeah, smoking in public, drinking and dancing at jazz clubs, all things that were upsetting their Victorian lineage before them. Oh, you want to dance to jazz and have fun post-war? How dare thou? You want to show your calf after working doubles during a war? How dare you? Put those caps away, put that out.
Number 3, the Russian Revolution. Revolution, comrades! The 1920s were a crazy time, man, and if you look at the history between the US and Russia, it's almost like a hero and a villain origin story. Okay, hear me out. World War I was a bad time for Russia. They dropped out in early 1918, shortly before the whole thing ended. Why? Because the communists were there to take over. That's just how it went. Russia went from a 300-year Romanov rule to communism within a few short years. Safe to say this was having a great effect on the already struggling nation. It seemed that the harder things got, the more communist Russia got. When looking at the states after World War I, for the most part, it was a huge financial gain. And besides being the decade of gangsters and bootleggers, this was the start of many corporations and brands, like Taylor mentioned. It seemed as things got better and became more capitalist. Interesting indeed. Duality.
Number 2, the Ponzi scheme. We've all heard the term Ponzi scheme at one point or another, but what does that even mean? Who is this man? Where can I find him? Why are we so mad at him? Why is he scheming so often? Why? Who does that? A Ponzi scheme is of course a sham of an operation. It all kicks off back in the 1920s when one Italian immigrant named Charles Ponzi moved to the United States. He arrived to the States with the same goal as anyone, to work. That's it, just to work and, be successful. At first, he didn't have much luck, but eventually Charles was hired at Bank Zerosi. And when the bank sadly went bankrupt, Ponzi was SOL. He needed to do something, and he needed to do something fast. So he dabbled into smuggling, but he got caught. After he was released, he went into the postal system, started to buy large quantities of postal coupons from countries with, a weak economy, and then he hired a bunch of agents, trained them up good, Wolf of Wall Street style, and the whole idea was that you would promise investors that they would receive double their investment back in return within 45 days. How lovely is that? Thus, the Ponzi scheme is born. Yeah, these agents got 10% commission too, which, as far as scams go, it's not too shabby, not bad at all.
Number 1, Black Tuesday. Uh-oh, stinky! The market crashed and now everyone's going broke. Big oof, right? Adam told me to say that. Anyway, yes, the great market crash of 29. It wasn't good. A mixture of outstanding loans, an already declining unemployment percentage, a struggling agriculture sector mixed in with a speck of low wages and stocks just not being worth what they were, is the cause of the crash. By 1932, a lot of stocks were only worth 20% of what they originally were before. The stock market crash was not the main cause of the Great Depression, however, it was a symptom of it. The market wouldn't fully be back to normal until after FDR's New Deal, or realistically, when World War II had started and kicked America's, and really the world's economy back into turbo mode. Number 10, Titanic. I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that. That was a quote from E.J. Smith. Who was that, you may ask? None other than the excellent Navy expert who was the captain of the Titanic. Oof. It would be very funny if not so ironic, or maybe that's where the humor is. Regardless, the Titanic was a headline in the news even before it got wet in the ocean. The largest luxurious vessel ever constructed until now, and it was unsinkable. I don't know about that. What modern times we live in where ships no longer sink? What modern times we live in where ships no longer sink? Well, if you've ever seen Leo smooch Kate Winslet in the back of your grandpa's car, then you know how well that went. The Titanic rests 13,000 feet below the ocean, not too far from the rock bite. That's Newfoundland.
Number 9. Chernobyl. If you've seen the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, then you have a very good understanding of just how terrifying this is. Chernobyl is the site of the Soviet nuclear power plant that in April of 1986 had a serious accident due to a flawed reactor design and staff that didn't really get the best training. The accident itself was explained really well in the show and at the trial that took place, but it resulted in a steam explosion and fires that released 5% of the radioactive core into the environment. The explosion ended 2 workers' lives, with acute radiation poisoning affecting a confirmed 123 people and ending 28 of those people's lives as well. Around 5,000 cases of thyroid cancer with 15 fatal incidents were probably caused by the radioactive iodine fallout. Look, it was not good. It was scary. And what was potentially even scarier was the way people tried to cover it up.
Number 8. Berlin Wall. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. For the younger audience that doesn't know, let me break it down for it. After World War II ended, relations between the West and the Soviet Union broke down, to the point of global destruction. Germany, having lost to all parties during the war, got split up, capitalist and communist. Trouble is, people living on the capitalist side were just living better, so people began flocking over to the better side. The communist government decided to build a big bad grey depressing wall, monitored by guards with orders to open fire if someone tried getting across with the proper documentation or reasoning. This went on for a few decades until one day in 1990 when the border crossings red tape was cut and the wall began to come down brick by brick. That must have been something to watch, and I can imagine for those who got to witness it, they were glued to their television sets. Very cool. Cool history.
Number 7. One giant leap. As most humans know, we have gone to the moon. Unless you think it was faked, in which case please civilly discuss below. But after traveling 240,000 miles in 76 hours, Apollo 11, that's the 11th Apollo mission, entered into a lunar orbit on July 19th, 1969. On July 20th, 1969, 2 men, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, touched down for the first time in the history of the Earth on the surface of our moon. And then 6 hours later, they left their craft and stepped out onto the surface. They left a plaque and some footprints, erected some flags, ran some tests, bada bing bada boom, and then they hopped back in the craft, had a little sleep, and departed on July 21st at 1:54 p.m. Earth time. And we've been back 5 more times since.
Number 6. The Roswell Incident. The Roswell Incident used to be the biggest event to ever happen in New Mexico history. Now it's being shadowed by a bald chemistry teacher, his science enthusiastic student, and a slimy lawyer. Who would have known? Well, for the second most eventful event to ever come out of New Mexico was the Roswell Incident. A mysterious flying object, other known as a UFO, crashed into the desert. Naturally, in the 1940s era US military, they kept secrets, the same way your mom holds on to family tea. Seriously, ask her about that one family member. She's gonna tell you something you don't want to know. This secrecy quickly spread rumors of it being an alien from outer space. Well, it wasn't until the 90s that this incident was officially declassified and declared to be nothing more than a weather balloon. Or at least that's what we were told. This didn't stop the town of Roswell, New Mexico, however, from adopting this alien rumor into the town's very fabric. To this day, the little green man can be found in Roswell as sort of a tourist attraction. Every town needs something.
Take me to your weeder. Take me to your weeder.
Number 5, Agnes Sampson. And now back to the dark stuff. This one's not as great. Turning the clocks now to 30 years after Mother Shipton, the general public isn't always so easy when it comes to clairvoyance. So around 1590, when King James VI, when he was ruling Scotland, this was an important time because the lovely Anne of Denmark-Norway, his wife, she was very much opposed to black magic or all that voodoo. She wasn't on board at all. During one commute back to Scotland, for example, the couple barely made it through a fierce storm. So King James VI, he was now convinced, because of his wife, that the storms were an outcome of black magic. Yeah, a witch cursed their commute. All because of a storm, they thought this, imagine that. So they charged one Agnes Sampson. The king and the queen all believed that these witches attended a coven on Halloween night, and that's what happened with their commute. So she was held prisoner until she confessed. And then at that point, she finally met her horrible fate. Her nonsensical, horrible fate. Number 4, plague bearer. Okay, if you think your job sucks, Hear me out. The hot summer of July 1665. Okay, what do we do with all these poor souls who have been hit by said plague during the Dark Ages? You can't just hide them all in the catacombs this time, right? We can't just hide them in a random place. We don't have that. So a plague bearer is the person that you need. Church wardens would organize burials. This was a normal thing back in the 1600s, but when the plague hit, they had to change things up a bit. Now things were a little bit dangerous. If somebody had the plague, these guys would be responsible for transporting them far, far away and then burying them. Plague bearers, that's crazy. A church would then house these plague souls far away from society. How grim is that? All because you got sick. But I mean, that's probably a good thing, all things considered, you know? If there's anything we learned in the past couple years, it's like, oh yeah, things spread. Just a little bit, including misinformation. Haha. Number 3, medieval barbers. A barber from the Middle Ages. Yeah, that title alone gives me the chills. If I have a toothache, I'm telling no one. That appointment's gonna suck, okay? Cavity, toothache, maybe you accidentally bit a rock, chipped a tooth, whatever. They would only pull it. Worst case, best case, your teeth are getting pulled no matter what. Yeah, barbers were responsible for cutting hair, pulling teeth, and bloodletting. The classic 3-in-1 appointment. Get it all done in 40 minutes or less. There you go. Keep the change, good sir, and a thing of ale. There you go. Get drunk, pull my teeth. Middle Ages. Back in the 1500s, patients were walking in with an arrow sticking out of them, right? Instead of cutting the tip off and then pulling it the opposite way, the arrow remover would cut into the injury, open it more, which would suck, and then it would hold it open. And then the barber would come in and then pull it out in his own barber way. Whatever his qualifications were, didn't really matter. If he was a barber, he was also pulling arrows out of your back. So you would go in for a toothache and then you would leave with an amputated foot. You never know. Medieval barbers sucked all the time. Number 2, the ducking stool. This next one requires so much effort. I can't believe this was a real thing that real people did. The ducking stool was made to punish women involved in sexual activities. How dare they? How dare thou? Men were punished too, but if we know anything about history, it was mostly women who had to put up with all of this shit. There was the first standard ducking stool, so women would have to, you know, sit in this chair, strap themselves down while sitting outside their houses or, you know, whatever. They get carried down the street. Humiliation at its finest. That was the main key here, where you'd, you know, come out and go, shame, shame for 46 minutes and then go back inside. That was your day back in medieval times. They had sex. Can you believe that? It's disgusting. Let's take the day off work and embarrass them and make signs. The second version of the ducking stool was essentially the same thing, only it was then dunked into a river over and over again to cool her immoderate heat. Yeah, we gotta cool these witches down. Great. I wonder where all these people, like, did they not realize where they came from? This is the dumbest shit. At least that's what French writer Francois Maximilien Mission says. They should cool off all of those angry villagers instead. They should dip them in the river. They're the ones burning with rage because somebody over here is getting some and they're not. Number 1, meowing nuns. If I'm not gonna talk about this one now, then I'm not sure when I'll get the chance to talk about it again. Back in the Middle Ages, a group of nuns were doing their, you know, COVID nun thing, as so many people did apparently back in. And this was odd in the Middle Ages because these nuns would have meowing sessions. Yeah, they wouldn't curse individuals, they wouldn't curse any long sea voyages. No, they would just gather around and meow all at the same time. The French convent, large might I add, many of nuns here, they would spend hours meowing like in sync. They'd be like, meow. It would annoy nearby civilians so much that eventually soldiers had to come in and just beg them to stop. They're like, please stop meowing. I don't know why you're meowing, but please stop. For most of these cases, most likely not witchcraft. This one here with the meowing nuns, I don't know. I think that was actually, something was afoot. That was actually a curse. Either that or it's the greatest prank in history. Either way, we have to finish on a nice happier note, dare I say.
Number 10, stone toilet paper. It's been said that only 2 things in life are certain: not living and taxes. However, I think a third point needs to be added, and that's everybody goes number 2. It's a part of life. You eat, your body takes in its nutrients, and then it gets rid of the waste. That's the cycle of life. It's kind of beautiful, actually. Then we all have to use an invention that I know we're all thankful for: toilet paper. But have you ever wondered what people of ancient times did? I know I do. After all, there was no Walmartius to purchase Greco Papyrus Rolleus, or the Greek staple that is olive oil. Trust me, that'll come into play later. Well, the answer, my friend, is very simple. Even simpler than the 3 seashells, and everybody knows how to use them. Cleansing stones. Yes, that's right. Smooth, rounded stones. just for the occasion. My mom always joked around about using newspapers like some folks did in the old days, but stones, they actually use stones to do that part. A little too rough for my Gerber baby bottom, if you will. No thank you, no. Mom, I was a Gerber baby. Number 9, painted statues. When you close your eyes and think of ancient Greece, what do you imagine? Oh yes, I'm just imagining it right now. Beautiful coastline cities with harbors bustling full of ships carrying fresh fish and cargo, men and women flocking the brick streets and markets. White marble monuments surround the city like clouds of opulence, and the statues of pure white marble depicting Greek gods and myths of yonder. Sounds great, right? Well, what if I told you that not all these beautiful white statues that you could see in museums were pure white marble as we know them today? Yes, that's right. Greek marble statues had color. They were painted with the best and brightest colors they had at the time. It's only with time that the color has faded. Some people want to repaint only after a few short years. Try a couple thousand. Number 8, beef up. Gotta get the gains, gotta get swole so your Discord crush will send you the heart emojis and ooh-oohs that you so desire. I'm sorry, that's so cringe, I'm so sorry. At least that's how I'm told romance works these days. Romance might have changed, but working out has not. The ancient Greeks worked out to maintain a peak athletic performance. That's right, brother. However, it wasn't exactly treadmills and pumping iron. One Greek athlete's training involved carrying a cow calf around all day until the calf reached adulthood. Pretty cool. This is all done naked, by the way, though, and slathered in olive oil. Not so cool. Athletes also ate their fair share to keep up with all the working out they did. Some cases up to 10 pounds of meat and bread a day. Talk about beefy boys. That's right, brother. Number 7, one night sneeze. We've all been there. It was a hot summer night. You went out with a couple of friends for girls' night. Tonight is all about the ladies. No guys, you say to each other. And now you're in the club and drinks are flowing. And that's when you see him. He's tall, handsome, and has blue eyes. You're smitten. Hours later, you find yourself under the sheets up to the neck like it's a primetime sitcom. The sun peers its way through curtains that haven't been cleaned since he bought them. And yes, that's right. That's a one-night stand. They happen, and sometimes people just want to have a little fun. Can you blame them? I can't. What I'm getting at is sometimes nights like those can have an 18-year investment after a 9-month down payment, if you catch my drift. The ancient Greeks had a simple solution for ladies who weren't interested in that kind of bargain. Sneeze. Yes, sneeze. Achoo! Sneeze. Sneeze away the night of Cinco de Mayo tequila shots at a bar called O'Grady's. The Greeks believed if you sneezed a whole bunch, you couldn't get preggers. Simple. Just simple. All you can do is sneeze, dude. Simple. Number 6, tasteful doctor. As humans today, we have a lot of knowledge in the medical field, and we're only getting smarter. Who knows what we'll be capable of in 100 years? Kind of amazing to think about. Well, despite the technology that the Greeks did not possess, any college professor today will tell you that they were not stupid. They weren't. We owe a lot to them. Part of that is in the medical field. For example, urine tests. A lot can be told about a person from their urine. The Greeks knew this, but they didn't have all that fancy schmancy machines to tell them what was in their urine. Instead, they did the next best thing and tasted the forbidden lemonade in order to determine what was wrong with the patient. Sure, you can tell a lot by that way too, but if the person was sick, well, you know how that goes. Let's keep the lemonade in the cups, please. Yes, I believe. Yes, you have something wrong with your liver. Number 5, tanks. Okay, so after a few Olympics, people got tired of walking those many miles just to see some dudes run a mile. We need more events, said the Olympic organizers, but what? We have athletes running, what else is there? Okay, I hear you. What if we get athletes to run, but with full military armor and gear on? Yeah, that's right. There was another race where athletes would wield the armor of the Greek soldiers and race. I can imagine that there was a clunking noise, or at least a lot of it, and also how difficult it must be to run in bronze armor. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. Come a little closer. A little closer. A little closer. Whoa, too close. Bronze armor isn't good for chafing. Because let me tell you something, hot Mediterranean sun, not a lot of water, and running in hot metal attire? Someone's gonna have to come over and put baby powder on my bum bum. Number 4, the classic. I don't know why, but when I think of ancient Greeks, I think of grapes on the vine, marble, chariots, and the movie 300. It's kind of hard to forget those spray-on abs. Although someone could put them on me, kind of nice. Equestrian events were another event of the ancient Greek Olympics, and I have something nice to say about something for once. While every other event was dominated by males because, well, only males were allowed to compete of course, the equestrian events allowed women. Nice! And naturally, ladies, when someone points the spotlight on you, you shine. A notable winner of the event was Ctesica, a Spartan princess and athlete who was an excellent horse breeder. I guess that's a nice thing to be remembered by. According to some records, 2 monuments were built in honor of her victory. I rode a horse once. I can firmly say that I prefer the automobile. Just saying. You walk around like that, that's why all the cowboys walk like this. You just do that all that. Number 3, the long jump. After running in armor, it was discovered that jumping makes for a great Olympic event. How high? How far? It's simple, really. It should come as no surprise that I did not perform well in that section of track and field day at school. To my disadvantage, there was no strength-based events because it was considered unhealthy for us because we were so young. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. My counter to that argument would be, why are you making tubby kids run the 1500 meter? That's liable to have the kid with asthma writing his math test in the hospital bed later. I'd probably be joining him. However, I am a supporter of the ancient Greek jumping event. Basically, athletes gotta jump as far as they can whilst holding 2 large rocks. Now, if we did that today, people would know what it's like to do a long jump when grandma feeds you too much. Yeah, it's not easy. Number 2, the discus, the javelin, and the hammer. Sounds like a good band. Hey, these are all events that we still compete in today. That's awesome, but doesn't it make you nervous when the athletes are throwing those bad boys around? Especially the hammer throw. God, it just makes me so nervous. While I couldn't find an exact example of an accident happening, I doubt the ancient Greeks had safety in mind for spectators. The discus was made from stone or bronze, and they were tossing those suckers the same way Guy Fieri tosses Caesar salad. Which is a lot because he's kind of a big guy too. However, for me, it's the javelin that's most terrifying, as that was an appropriate weapon of war for the time, and athletes are just throwing them around like it's nothing. You're telling me the crowd was a safe distance away from the splash zone? Yeah, just keep your eye in the sky to be safe, folks. I don't know about that. Number 1, rap battle. Honestly, this is something we should bring back to the Olympics. While I was complaining about not being able to compete in strength-based events earlier, I, as a theater kid, would have much preferred some of the other less intensive events the ancient Greeks had up to offer. The ancient Greeks were not just chucking stones and chafing in bronze armor. There was also a competition with the arts. Poetry, song, and singing. Imagine if America entered Eminem into a rap battle contest. There would be no contest. Imagine if Canada entered one for musicians. K.D. Lang, Celine Dion, and Anne Murray, just singing angels.
Number 10, the Spanish Inquisition. Ah, yes. The Spanish Inquisition, the process of combating heresy, or as I like to call it, people not agreeing with you. See, when someone doesn't agree with me, I'll try my best to convince them otherwise. Or I'll just, I don't know, carry on living my life because what they believe is not my business. But not in Spain from 1478 to 1834, no sir. Here we have a guy called the Grand Inquisitor who was the head of the Inquisition in Spain. He was empowered by the Vatican to deal with heretics, however he deemed worthy, which seemed to be fire because there were over 2,000 burning at the stakes. More than 160,000 Jews were expelled from Spain, and those who remained, along with a heck of a lot of Muslims, were forced to convert. I could go on about how bad it was, but I got 9 other points to write here. Number 9, Ottomans stole my baby. How do you create a loyal army when a bunch of your subjects don't really trust or like you very much? You go the old First Order in the new Star Wars trilogy route, and you steal children and brainwash them. Duh. If you were a Christian family living in the Ottoman-controlled Balkans, Anatolia, or the Caucasus, you had to pay the blood tax. That means every 4 or 5 years, your Ottoman overlords would come along and take a male child under the age of 2 to be converted to Islam, and then educated as soldiers to serve in the Janissary. But hey, to make up for your forced brainwashing and enrollment in the military, you were paid, and you did get preferential treatment because, I mean, you don't even remember being not an Ottoman. Kinda messed up that you were used to fight against the same Christians who brought you into this world though. Number 8. Ottomans need to chill. The Ottomans were kind of the worst. Now, yes, That point of view was bolstered by the Christian parts of the world, so we can imagine they were a little biased. But when you're known for slaughtering humans to get things done, then yeah, you aren't going to be the first person invited to family dinner, you know? Two great examples of Ottomans just going that extra mile would be in 1480 when they de-lifed the city of Otranto in Italy for not converting to Islam, and in 1571 when they took the city of Famagusta and made sure every Christian who lived there didn't see the following day. The Ottoman commander did some lovely things to the Venetian commander. He said, "Got your nose," and ears, gave him an unwanted ride around the city and presented him as a trophy to his sultan. This definitely provoked some Christian clapbacks though. Just take a look at the guy called Vlad the Impaler. Number 7. Christians need to chill too. Oh, did you think the Ottomans were the only ones out here committing atrocities? Surprise! Welcome to the real world, kiddo. European Christian rulers were not any better. You see, back in the day, many rulers decided to employ mercenaries such as the condottieri in Italy and the Landsknecht in Germany to fight their private wars for them. These mercenaries were here for one reason: money. And as such did not go the normal warfare routes. Instead of attacking fortified positions, the condottieri would go around the countryside burning and looting. They would even bite the hand that feeds, like in 1527 when 14,000 Landsknecht sacked Rome after they were not paid. The Christian mercenaries were interested in one thing: cold hard cash, and no one was safe if they didn't get it. The Landsknecht were even said to not be allowed into hell for what they did in Rome. Number 6. The church is corrupt? No way! The church has always been political, but in the Renaissance it became publicly political and corrupt. There were two main families whose members became the Pope, the Medici and the Borgia, and neither one of them was too great or even followed the rules of the church. Pope Alexander Borgia VI, for example, had 4 children with a mistress that he continued to see while he was the Pope. One of his sons became the Archbishop of Valencia at age 17. Which you won't be surprised to know is not the norm. On the Medici side of things, we have Pope Leo X, who was accused of taking part in sins like masquerade balls, selling salvation, nepotism, and excessive spending. The corruption got cleaned, but it took quite the event for that to happen.
Number 5. Basket of bees. Guess what this one is? It's pretty much, that's exactly what it is. It's horrible. We often look at ancient Rome as the birthplace for numerals, modern plumbing, social life, all that good stuff. Don't get it twisted, ancient Rome had a lot in common with the Dark Ages as well, okay? The punishments that they would inflict on others, horribly creative, I'll say that. Like for example, a basket of bees. A basket of bees, there we go. Maybe wasps, who knows, I don't know, history gets all crazy, you know? This punishment saw the victim placed in a large woven basket, naked, might I add. Then the basket was hoisted up near a beehive, of course, and then Romans would just anger the hive. They would just shake the basket. And then in turn, all these bees would sting said victim to death. This was meant to be a long and painful death, but eventually, this is how humans realized folks were allergic to bees, because they would meet their demise a little too fast, you know? Romans would be like, what happened? What's going on? Are we going home now? That's it?
Number 4, the Colosseum. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, right? Right? No, I'm asking you, I don't know, that's a saying, I think I've heard that somewhere. The word Colosseum is a Latin noun formed from the word colossus, meaning gigantic. And it's huge! It once held more than 50,000 people at one time or another. That's literally the Yankee Stadium. This oval stadium was built from cement, limestone, and volcanic rock. Yeah, that thing ain't going anywhere. Historians and archaeologists are still discovering and unearthing secrets of this site. In fact, most of Rome still hasn't even been dug up yet. What? That's right. In fact, only about a tenth lays discovered, with the other 90% still somewhere around 30 feet below street level. Who knows how many wonders of the world lay unearthed. The Colosseum, also known as the 7th wonder of the world, lays megalithic, 615 feet above the ground at the center or heart of the city. It is the largest ancient amphitheater ever built, and it is still the largest standing amphitheater in the world today despite its age. Its use for the last 1,000 years were rampant with events, festivals, and would even flood its center to reenact naval wars with real ships. How did they get those things in there? I bet that's how they made the bottle and the ship thing, just kinda. And all that water? Just a guy with a giant hose? Yeah, go ahead, turn it on. Yeah, we're gonna be here a while, guys. We gotta push the play.
Number 3, boot and rally. The Urban Dictionary added the old boot and rally back in 2002, but Romans, back in the ancient day, they were way ahead of us. Romans knew how to get down, and they also knew how to get it back up. Yeah, ancient Romans would boot and rally in order to continue eating and drinking. What would normally be a red flag at any house party or event was a sign of respect back then. These banquets, these were social events, okay? They were nothing like Tyler's toga party last Halloween. It's not the same at all. Same amount of puke, not the same theme. Attending these parties was a sign of social standing, so you wanted to be around the longest. You wanted to drink the most, dance the most, converse the most, and also, yeah, puke the most. No playing around in Rome, okay? I wouldn't last 2 hours at one of these. Kyle knows what's up, he's seen it. I bring Tums to the bar now, you know what I mean? I'm always prepared. The solution in ancient Rome was actually quite simple, long before Tums. See, what you would do is you would excuse yourself from dinner, go across the hall to the vomitorium, then you would grab a feather, any feather you like, and then you would just go, and then put it back, and then go right back to dinner. And then enjoy more lobster, because, hey, now you made room.
Number 2, gladiators. If you've seen the blockbuster hit Gladiator with Russell Crowe, my name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, then you absolutely nailed it, because that's pretty well it. A stew of slaves, lawbreakers, and ex-soldiers, the Gladiator games were one of Rome's most brutal and vibrant live events. Gladiators would be held underground under the Colosseum until they would be called upon to spill the blood of both man and animal in sport. Fighters would be matched based on their size, previous record, skill level, style of fighting, and years of experience, just like the professional contact sports today. Fighting out of the red corner at 195 pounds, the reigning victor, Spartacus! Oh, you're Spartacus? Oh, sorry. No, you're Spartacus. Okay. But it wasn't all thumbs down for these fighters. Gladiators were the celebrities of their time. Yeah, you can take that. There you go. Okay, one. We'll do one. Some gladiators even fought years after earning their freedom. Those years did not seem to be that long, with the average lifespan of the gladiator, though, living just to their mid-20s. I mean, it's pretty physical. The event was not just to kill your opponent. In fact, months of training and preparation was had. There was more of a spectacle of sportsmanship then, most of the time wounding their enemy, which would lead to the slow demise of a fighter, usually ranging between anywhere from 8 to 10 fights in their whole career. Come on, dude. 50,000 people cheering you on at the Yankee Stadium? Kyle! 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 Oh, no!
And finally, number 1, fast food. Imagine getting a Happy Meal in 45 BC. You just get a toy of like Spartacus, just, oh, that's nice, I'll put it on the window. Romans were indulging in fast food before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 BC. They were having a good time until they weren't. Archaeologists recently excavated a thermopolium in the ruins of what was once thriving city of Pompeii. We found a snack bar in 2019 and it's since been reopened. Yeah, you can now pick up shifts once again at this restaurant that was open thousands of years ago. As of last August, the restaurant, located at the intersection of Silver Wedding Street and Alley of Balconies, they would serve pork, snails, beef, fish, you name it, and the corner also doubled down and crushed fava beans, more often than not mixing them with wine. So it was a good time, it was social. This was bumping on a Saturday night. The closest thing we have to ancient restaurants in Canada now is like coffee time. I don't know, every coffee time in Canada looks like it was damaged by Mount Vesuvius. Looks abandoned. The walls are broken in, nobody's working. I'm like, can I get a coffee? Hi, hello?
Number 10, Clash of the Titans. An Avengers level threat, baby. The Titans were the big bad giants who ruled over the earth and the gods. Naturally, they all got along and there were never any problems, ever. Yeah, right. They fought like cats and dogs, though I never understood that because all the dogs and cats I know always got along great. But the Titans fought, and they fought some more, until your favorite boy Zeus had enough and kind of took control over everything. It's Zeus, it's what he does. It's too bad Aaron Yeager wasn't there to help out. Number 9, Prometheus. Poor Prometheus. This is my favorite tale from Greek mythology. I think it's rather sad for Prometheus. All he wanted to do was give us the knowledge of fire, and look at all the things that we did with it. Forged iron and steel, heated our homes, so no one would ever go cold again. And we cooked, which gave Gordon Ramsay 23 hit shows and a reason to curse when asking for the lamb sauce. Where's the lamb sauce? Prometheus went directly against Zeus's orders, and if you didn't know, that's kind of a bad thing. It can wind you up in a rather unfortunate position. A position like being chained up and having a large bird come feast on your intestines. Like I eat mom's spaghetti. She makes a good spaghetti, thanks mom. Make a good spaghetti. Number 8, Icarus. I think we can all relate to this one, or at least have been told a version of this when we were flush. Things were going good for us. In a nutshell, Icarus got some wax wings and gained the ability to flight. Mind you, that was probably the dream of many ancient peoples. After Icarus got his wings, he got a little arrogant. He wanted to push his wings to the limit. Kind of like Iron Man in the first Iron Man movie. But instead of falling in a multi-million-dollar supersuit and looking handsome while doing it, Icarus sniffed one too many of his own farts and flew too close to the sun, where he burned up in it. So what's the lesson learned here, folks? Keep yourself grounded and don't sniff your own farts. Number 7, Jason and the Argonauts. Avenger level threat acquired. For some reason in our lives, you find stories of our favorite heroes forming almighty and powerful groups. The Avengers, the Justice League, BTS. That one might have too much power. But yes, Jason and the Argonauts were a band of heroes on adventures, slaying beasts, taking names, and Greekifying the area. Sadly, for Jason and the Argonauts, every time they try and make a movie about it, it just never worked for them. I don't know. They had a visually impressive one in the 60s, and everything after that has just been a complete misfire. Hollywood, if your casting calls come my way, just know I make a great Jason. Look at me. I could be Jason. A sword, a shield. And there we go, that's it. Number 6, Hercules. Hercules, the strong one. Or the one where Danny DeVito coaches him through the process of being a Greek legend. If Danny DeVito is coaching you through anything, that probably means you're gonna come out on top. And yes, before you start typing in the comment section, technically speaking, Hercules is the Roman copy of Heracles. I know. However, it's kind of one of those things that everyone just knows the one, so anytime a Greek dude shows up with muscles, you blush and you think of Hercules. As far as Greek mythology goes, it doesn't get any more classic than a super strong guy with abs and biceps, and maybe a little bit of olive oil on him, I don't know.
Number 5, Private Warbear. It wasn't just members of the human species who took part in WW2. No sir, mules, dogs, pigeons, horses, bears. Bears? Soldiers in Poland had come across a bear cub on the side of the road whose mother had been unfortunately removed from this world by hunters. One of these soldiers decided he was going to raise the cub as his own and named him Wojtek. Wojtek was trained by this soldier and a civilian, and eventually he was even enlisted in the Polish army so that he could legally come aboard a British transport ship. Fortunately, he didn't actually do any fighting, but he was given his own paybook, serial number, and the rank of private. He would bunk up with other soldiers, loved beer and cigarettes, and helped transport supplies including heavy boxes of ammunition. Nice.
Number 4, Rough Riders. Okay, think about the toughest guy you know. Maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your uncle, maybe it's you. Maybe it's me. No matter who it is, I bet they aren't as tough as Teddy Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. He was well known for being a man who enjoyed nature, the explorer's man if you will, safari hunter, Nobel Peace Prize winner, soldier, and a big booster for the National Park System. The man did it all, but did you know that during a speech in 1912, President Roosevelt was shot? Gasp. Now before I tell you what happened next, I want you to take a guess what happened next. Did he A, drop to the ground and perish, or B, the assassin was a lousy shot and missed, giving the president a chance to return fire? What's your answer? Type down below. Well, the answer was secret option C. I gotcha. He was shot and showed the crowd that he was. And then he said, I can no longer make a long speech because I have been shot, where he then continued to deliver an 82-minute speech. What a man.
Number 3, Pepsi Army. Did you know that the company Pepsi actually had the world's 6th largest military for a brief moment in time? Okay, so basically what happened is that Pepsi realized that they were inferior to Coca-Cola, and so they installed AI into their Pepsi cans worldwide, creating an autonomous army of soda cans. No, that's not what happened, you goof. Actually, in 1959, at an American exhibition, PepsiCo tried to prove the great concept of capitalism. Pepsi actually did a pretty good job. But the cash of the Soviet Union wasn't really accepted all over. So, instead, the Soviets traded submarines, military ships, and a lot of vodka for tons and tons and tons of Pepsi. Enough that Pepsi ranked 6th among the world's military powers until it sold all of that.
Number 2, Emu War. Australia, land of sun, beaches, and spiders that got too buff. too much for me. But today, we're talking about my friends from down under. Shout out to the Aussies. Chetty loves you. But we gotta talk about the Emu War, guys. What the heck was going on there? In a nutshell, emus were causing havoc in Australia's agriculture sector and destroying farms at an alarming rate. So the government said, right then, Chinese and get rid of the buggers. A couple of soldiers were given large automatic weapons to deal with the pests. Well, it didn't turn out very well, as the emus just didn't seem to want to eat the bullets. Can you blame them? I can't. One Australian politician jested that the emus should be given medals for their bravery. In the end, the emus won.
Number 1. Free falling. 50 years ago, on January 26, 1972, Vesna Volovi, a flight attendant from Serbia who worked for the Yugoslavian airline JAT, got on board JAT Flight 367 to Copenhagen. Also on board that flight, unfortunately, was a device inside a briefcase that went boom over Czechoslovakia. While everyone else on board did not survive, Miss Volovic was stuck inside the shattered fuselage by a food cart as the plane and Vesna fell 33,000 feet. Thankfully, there were trees to break the fall and snow to cushion the landing near a small Czech village. But Vesna still suffered a skull fracture, broken legs, 3 broken vertebrae, she was temporarily paralyzed from the waist down, and put in a coma, leaving her with no memory of the flight or her descent. While there was some skepticism about the way the flight went down, she still received a Guinness World Record for the longest survived fall without a parachute. So that makes up for everything, right? Yeah.
Number 10, hotel speed. Okay, picture this. You're young and in a hotel with your parents. Maybe it's a vacation, maybe it's a trip, or maybe it's a hockey game. Nice. Nonetheless, you find yourself in a long hallway with a strange looking carpet. Hotel hallways always have weird carpets, I don't know. Maybe it's the giant hamburger and milkshake you just ate. Maybe it's the hotel TV, or the excitement of just not being at home. But something has changed. You're different. Your powers have been amplified. For this corridor will be your personal racetrack. A shame Guinness World Records isn't here to clock you in at max speed, because for some reason if you fly down that hallway any faster, the rug would catch fire. Yes, the joys of running down a hotel hallway. This is probably how the first Olympians felt at the first Olympic Games. I'm comparing it to that for some reason, sure we'll go with it. Where the only event at these Olympic Games was running. Like many of the other events that would later come later on, this was done without clothing, which is fine. As long as you're, not doing that in the hotel hallway. Keep clothes on. Number 9, WWE, brother. Only if you could have seen the look on my face when I discovered that wrestling in the WWE isn't as real as I thought it was. The shock, the confusion, and the loud ringing in my ear. It was pretty serious for me. I got really into it as a kid. Gave me some Vietnam flashbacks, seriously. You mean to tell me that there was an intricate planning into every hidden fall, every entrance, and every time we heard the sound of a steel chair connecting with someone's forehead? Oh man. As a kid, I never would have guessed that, but when the Undertaker walks in a room, you take notice. Those thoughts just go away. Sadly, the ancient Greeks did not have cage matches, turnbuckles, or personas based on hyper male confidence. What they did have, however, was some real wrestling, some bare knuckle, no clothes, oiled up kind of wrestling. Nice. Instead of a one leg up pin, a scoring system was used for when the opponent's body was on the ground. And I'm sure lots of people got injured in the process. No thanks. I'll stick to the cage matches. Number 8, Pankration. Here's another story for you. It might seem kind of silly, but growing up, I got to witness the birth of a mainstream sport. The UFC got its start in the early 90s, but blew up in the mid-2000s. Now, I'm not much of a sports guy. Besides major championship matches or games, I don't really watch any sports. I'm more of a film and video game guy, if you couldn't tell. However, my first interaction with the UFC was seeing an octagon-shaped ring, and my grade 2 geometry immediately kicked in and said, That's an octagon. Wow, okay, that's different. However, the second thing that I noticed is that this was not wrestling, and this wasn't boxing. It was kind of a mixture of both. Sort of a mixed martial art, if you will. Well, that's kind of what Pankration was. There was no indirect punching or kicking, but pretty much anything else goes. To me, this sounds like a good way to get injured. Kind of like wrestling before, now it's just even worse. And as I'm sure you all know, paper cuts can be lethal back then, so maybe not such a good idea. Did I mention this is done without clothes too? Everyone's naked. Number 7, the road trip. This isn't an Olympic event, but honestly, it should have been. Think about it for a minute. I want you guys to look out the nearest window right now. Get up, go ahead, look out the nearest window. Tell me what you see. You probably see a road with cars. When you need a fast food fix, it's as simple as getting in a car and driving on the road to your destination. Or getting it delivered with your favorite food delivery app. It's 2022, we can do a lot of crazy stuff now. What I'm getting at is that people from all over the Greek city-states came to Olympia to witness the first Olympics. Except, you know, it would have been a triathlon just to get there. Frankly, my biggest fear, walking. That was the main mode of transportation, which after a while in those sandals was probably hell. Imagine trekking many, many miles by land and sea to only be exhausted to watch athletes become exhausted. Oh, I need some water just thinking about it. Woo. Number 6, peace. Peace. What's better than a good war? A better armistice, or at least I'd like to hope so. During these first Olympic Games, which on a side note, if I had a time machine and a scooter, I'd love to see firsthand. There was people and athletes coming from all corners of Hellenistic civilization, all Greek states and colonies. Well, sometimes these Greek states got caught up in these little things called wars. Who knew, right? But when the Olympics were on, a truce was called. Messengers were dispatched to announce the truce, which gave all the people traveling on their long treks safe passage. I also find it somewhat amusing that they did this all for one day. That's right, the events only lasted one day. Some folks did days of traveling only to have it all be over in 24 hours. The opening ceremony couldn't have taken that long either, so I feel like it's kind of a waste of time. Only if we got some of that peace right now. Russia is looking at Ukraine a certain kind of way, just waiting to act up. Bad Russia, stay in your corner. Number 5, the gentleman's tablet. Hey, at the end of the day, we're only human, and sometimes we do as they do on the Discovery Channel. We wouldn't be here if the people of ancient times did not put on a little Marvin Gaye and just feel the groove, baby. Well, strangely enough, not much has changed since then, and that includes our own curiosity with each other's gabagool. My generation has OnlyFans, the last generation had Playboy and Penthouse, and maybe the Martha Stewart magazine. That woman can do no wrong. Well, folks, in ancient Mesopotamia, they needed their fix too. Playboy was a few thousand years away, so the next best thing was these clay tablets depicting actions that my editors are wondering how they're even gonna show you. This ain't junior high health class. Y'all know how this works. So did the ancients. It's why there's a few of these tablets floating around and, in different positions, taking bricked up to a whole new level.
Number 4, a pillar of flesh. Another empire that rose to prominence in Mesopotamia would be the Assyrian Empire. And the kings here were pretty damn awful. They ruled with bloody iron fists of torture and mass life-ending escapades. One such king, Ashurnasirpal II, inherited a huge, strong army from his father, and using it, he would destroy pretty much anyone who didn't like him in ways that may have left his soldiers with PTSD. Like actually. He burned, blinded, and removed the craniums of rebels, set maidens on fire, and condemned opposing soldiers to die of dehydration in the desert. But I think what may be the worst way he dealt with those who opposed him would be when he flayed all the chiefs who had revolted and built a pillar that he covered with their skin. Hey, I think I feel my lunch coming back up. Andrew, get in here. No.
Number 3, Sumerian suds. If you're like me, then you love a good beer. Frankly, I could drink them ice cold or warm, just like our friends across the pond. Cheers, how are you doing? I'm doing great, thanks for asking. With that being said, I could never enjoy my Canadian lifestyle if it weren't for the Sumerians, as they may have invented the first beer. No more drunk hockey fights, no more cotty weekends in the Muskokas, and no more just sending her buddy. You gotta send her. Being the agricultural revolutionaries that they were, it makes sense that they would discover the fermentation process of wheat. Tablets found in excavations depict people drinking out of large jars that are speculated to be filled with a gorgeous 3.5% brew, which if you ask me, is the best way to enjoy said beverage, with friends around you in a big jar.
Number 2, Gilgamesh. Even if you don't know who it is, it's likely you have heard the name Gilgamesh. In Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh was the hero of Uruk, just like how Big Ched is the hero of my dreams. And in said city, stone tablets and even the art on walls tell his stories and legends. That's Gilgamesh, not Andrew. According to the stories, his mother was thought to be the goddess Ninsun, and his father was, give me a sec here, Lugalbanda, the god king of Uruk. And apparently, this half-man, half-god was the ruler of the city for 126 years, which would be completely insane if it were actually true. It could be, we don't actually know. The second half of the epic poem of Gilgamesh is all about him trying to figure out the meaning of life. And buddy, I mean, same here. We're all just dust in the wind, dude. Dust in the wind.
Number 1, the wheel, the cradle of civilization. There's a lot that happens in Mesopotamia, and Adam and I would need a whole history class to tell you everything that was happening in the Middle East. Maybe one day we'll actually teach a class, who knows? Yeah, maybe that'd be a good idea. But one thing I can tell you is that thanks to ancient Sumerians, we have wheels. Maybe it was a pottery wheel. Maybe it was for a carriage. Maybe it was because we just like to make stuff. I don't know, but I don't think I need to tell you how important wheels are and how they literally reinvented the wheel. It was extremely revolutionary. Boats, floats, doors, stores, drawers, planes, trains, cars, Mars if you count the rover, bikes, flour mills, gears, cogs, clocks, and your 11th grade best friend Buddy. He was wheeling and dealing.